Well, to get started, thank you all very, very much. This means a lot to me. I mean, most of you know me, and I don't spend a lot of time with small talk, at least in these forums. I am very frustrated on your behalf, and I see it all across the United States with folks complaining about the recruiting problem, and it seems to me, you know, Mark Twain, I think it was, said about the weather. Everybody talks about it, but nobody does anything about it. And so I look at the efforts with recruiting, and I know folks are putting a lot of effort into it. But clearly, if we built a machine and an inconsistent product came out the other end of it, every time we turned it on, we would say, maybe we need to fix that machine. Maybe it's not working the way it should. So I guess I just got frustrated on y'all's behalf enough that I thought, well, I'm going to risk it. I'm going to contact a bunch of my friends, at least this round. There will be another one, excuse me, at some point with another group. But I'll call a bunch of people together and do a little brainstorming and try to figure out what really is at the core of this, because clearly some things have worked and some things have not worked. And so I put together also a slide program that I want to walk y'all through. And before we go away today, I want to make sure that folks, we have some discussion about the items that I have in this slide program, but also I'd like to have your input into the following. I mean, y'all are really powerful people, and I get that, and I respect it. But clearly, we're going to have a team larger than this group right here to solve this problem. And I mean by that everywhere from mayors and city council people, county commissioners, the legislature, the governor's offices, media, you name it, has got to help solve this problem. And so I have some slides to be able to talk about that as well. So given that, I'm going to move you all. As you know, a couple of you I talk to regularly. I have two monitors in my office here, so I'm going to move you all over to my right here, and put the slide program up in front of me. I want to walk you through it a little bit, and if you do me a courtesy, perhaps, and just take some notes, and then we can come back and go back through it again and talk about these items. As soon as I find my cursor, I'll do that. All right, here we go. At this point, can everyone see my screen? It should say, it's the cover slide for the slide program. Y'all can see that? Thanks, Chris. Roxanne, before I go on, I know you've got to leave in about an hour or so. Thank you for attending as much as you can. And I will make sure you get a copy, excuse me, I'll make sure you get a copy of this slide program. And then with everybody's permission, I think we'll probably be doing a follow-on to this meeting in about a month. But if you have the slide program, you and the chief and whomever, and maybe the city manager can sit down and put some thought to it and bring those back to the next meeting. So I'll make sure you do that. So I was getting ready to show this through this. Now, this is me, folks. I have no pride of authorship, and I don't have to be right. So, you know, I'll go through it. You can agree with some, you'll disagree with some, but I intended to provoke some thinking about these issues. You know, it's one of those old things that I think Einstein is reputed to have noted, that the very definition of insanity is to continue to do the same things over and over again while expecting a different outcome. Jesse Potter is the first that I could find to attribute this observation. If you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always gotten. Well, you know, recruiting problems in public safety, or in government for that matter, is not a new thing. I've been hearing about it for 25 years as I've worked with this. Eric Bush, you remember back in the days when you and I first met, hey, we got a recruiting problem. And so I think COVID has exacerbated that, but this is not a new thing. It's not like it's a brand new item. In this slide program, there is a roster of all of you, the folks who signed up for this in a couple of slides here. Again, I hope that you all will network with one another. There's great synergy there and opportunities. One of the most expensive, painful things I ever did in my entire life was let my network die. When I left the corporate world a long time ago, and I let that network die. Please, please don't do that. So, about 50 people here should return your emails and return your phone calls, and we'll continue to add to that as we go by. For those of you who are from human resources and from support services, thank you. Some of this is probably not going to make sense right up front, but forgive me. I do want to be clear on a perspective that I have that just Stevie has. A few years ago, I did a workshop in Oregon, and this had to do with some counties in Oregon that were about to go bankrupt. I mean, seriously, in financial problems. And they had lost a lot in terms of funding and staffing public safety, principally law enforcement. And I remember talking to one of the county commissioners who said to me, well, I guess what we need to do is figure out how to prioritize law enforcement. I found that attitude part of the problem and certainly offensive. I believe that public safety is not more work for government. Public safety is the work of government. When we can properly fund and staff law enforcement, you can prioritize all you want, everything else. But without that, we kind of got some symptoms here we don't want to have. As Cicero noted a long time ago, that the safety of the public is the highest law. It was then, it is now. No one wants to come to Jackson, Wyoming. No one wants to go to, Grant County, Oregon, or to Marysville if it's not a safe place to live, work, learn, play, and visit. At least the folks who are going to be contributing members of a society. We go back, all of us, to looking at the preamble of our Constitution, that we all exist, you all exist, I exist, getting our powers from the consent of the governed. What that means is, folks, we got to start asking them more questions than we are now. And I'll come to that in a little bit. As I noticed, it's not more work, it's the work. And so what we're embarking on here in terms of how to get up to be properly staffed and properly funded is absolutely critical to all the other things we might want to get done in any jurisdiction. We go back to establishing some policies. Our word policy comes from a Latin word, policy, which basically meant the art of governing, the art of government. That Latin word was policie. Oh, folks, the art of governing, the art of government is where we got the word police. Law enforcement, police, I believe that it is integral to the infrastructure of any jurisdiction, absolutely integral. And so I think we got some PR work to do, all of us, whether it's all y'all in law enforcement or me in the private, Eric and I in the private sector, or other folks in HR or wherever. We got some work to do to get that back to the top rather than wherever we have allowed it to fall. For these purposes today and for any ensuing visits, and I'm really in it for the long haul with all of you, as most of you know, I think we got to look inward. I'm hoping that we'll put away this whole notion of trying to fix a broken system, and instead let's devise a program that works from the ground up. I don't want to put any more band-aids on things. Y'all tried that for 150 years and it ain't working. And so I think that's probably enough data collection to realize it's probably not going to work for in the future. This is a harsh question that I would ask you all to think about in your respective areas. Whether that's Lewiston or all of Nez Perce County, for that matter, in Idaho. If it's the I-5 corridor, anywhere from, well, those of you who live in Pierce or in Skagit counties, I guess I have to ask myself, what's going on in our own jurisdictions, whether that's the whole state of Wyoming or wherever, what's going on in our jurisdiction that we can't recruit everybody we need from right here inside our own jurisdiction? What are their attitudes and their beliefs? What image do we have out there in the community? All those things contribute to folks wanting to sign up. Are those things the media-driven reputation of law enforcement in your jurisdiction? Again, what's some of the root stuff? Have we not fully engaged the community and involved them so they become informed ambassadors on behalf of our programs and services? Have we failed to present this industry as a career of choice? And I want to talk a bit more about that as we move through. I have some very strong, strident feelings about that one. Have other members, whether it's the city council or board of commissioners or the legislature or anybody else, undermined the reputation of public safety? Is that maybe one of those reasons why we're not getting folks locally to sign up? The bottom line for me is everybody, at least most of the folks I know, make some assumptions about why people aren't applying. They're going to other places. They're not going into law enforcement. Well, why is that? Folks, we haven't asked them. We have not, that I can find, asked people who are graduating from college, from high school every year, why aren't you going into law enforcement? I have found no study that asks the group that. So we maybe want to find some of that out. Those of you who know my analogy of not just flying off in some direction, but having a destination we're going to, knows that the second step of any flight is to identify what could blow us off course. And among those things that could blow us off course, and I hope this is large enough. Terry, can you see that okay on your monitor? Terry Lester?
Yes, I can.
Okay, by the way, everybody, today's Terry Lester's birthday. Gotcha.
Happy birthday, Terry.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make sure the writing was large enough. Recruiting is not a new problem, as I mentioned. I want to explain what I mean by this. Too many people in love with the disease that's killing the industry. I learned years ago that before we go healing anybody or healing something, we want to make sure those people aren't in love with the disease that's killing them. Folks, I've been to the statewide association meetings. I've been to national conferences. I've been inside organizations listening to how people talk about not having enough funding and not having enough staff. It seems to me they enjoy talking about that more and wallowing in the symptoms than they do in sitting down and figuring out how to solve this problem. And so I think, for those of you in Washington, I had a chat with Dave Dahl the other day. He's a great guy. And for those of you who don't know him, he retired as the chief from Bellingham, longtime friend. He's now the director of education and training for WASPIC. And so he and I had a discussion about this as well, that WASPIC has a role in helping us to present law enforcement as a career of choice, not just a job, a career of choice. But we can't wallow in how miserable things are. That's being in love with the disease that's killing the industry. Certainly COVID, as everybody knows, has some effect, but I think it's just made it more acute, but it isn't the cause. You all have heard of the big resignation. That is where people are leaving jobs all across the United States, and not necessarily just in law enforcement, but elsewhere. However, I point out here, there is a strong job market out there, but I also believe it is an employee market, it's a buyer's market, not a seller's market. Same with housing. Right now, I think across the nation, people are saying, well, that's just not the right job, or I want something else from employment rather than the way things have been done in the past, which brings me to this issue. I'm not one for blaming the victim. I hear a lot about, well, those are damn Gen Xers and the millennials and whatever things that are happening there. They don't love industries. They don't love government. They don't love this agency as much as I love it. And every time I hear complaints about the next generation and their values and all that, my first question is always the same thing. Whose children are those? Whose children are those? Where did they learn that? And what might we gain from understanding what they want from the workplace? I see it a lot across the nation. There are folks coming up with big old signing bonuses, which folks I truly believe has the net effect of balkanizing public safety. And for those of you who might not know what that means, the big agencies have got a lot of money to do it. They're stepping out. I don't know if it's being effective or not, but that leaves some of the smaller agencies, if not all the smaller agencies, way behind in the effort. Washington State, y'all got a hella rob-a-cop program going on there, and I don't think that's effective in the long run. Besides that, do we really want people to come here simply and only because of the money? I know, for example, from my own experience, and some of you have heard me talk about this, you cannot pay people enough money to buy off their alienation from toxic work cultures. It can't happen. And so perhaps we need to think about those in terms of the recruiting effort and the public image of the industry as well. Every year there's rounds of retirements and resignations. And when that happens, well, a classic. A few years ago, there was an agency in Oregon that their sheriff, their chief deputy, and a couple of their sergeants all retired on the same day. And I have friends that are working there who are saying, hey, Dan, you want to be sheriff? I don't want to be sheriff. And so when that happened, the whole organization kind of started tumbling into disarray, and poor productivity and public image suffered as well. Maybe since we know those resignations and retirements are going to happen, maybe we have an opportunity to double hire in slots, so we don't have that kind of transition, which should open a lot of possibilities for you all. Forgive me, but I just think this do more with less is a mantra of morons. I covered that in my book. What it really means is this, folks. It means there's only two kinds of people who pay. The customer, in our case, the taxpayer, the customer or the team. If the customer doesn't see why they should join in the programs, why they should pay more or continue to pay at all, it's going to come out of somebody's hide in the team. It's going to show up coming out of somebody's hide in this team with mandatory overtime, with broken family relationships, divorces, alcoholism, chemical abuse, child abuse, negativism in the workplace, heart attacks, strokes, and dying within 5 years after retirement. That's where the bill gets paid. And so when I talk about this as being cowardice in the face of the voter, I really would hope that elected officials would start stepping up and helping with something. Right now, there are two options, strategically speaking, for every organization. You can be in the repair mode, or you can be in the maintenance mode. Having to backfill slots in a chart of organization is the repair mode. We're always trying to catch up. It's like having a machine that's broken and we got to constantly be fixing the thing. That's quite different than being in the maintenance mode. Getting up so we are hiring people against an ideal chart of organization rather than hiring to fill a vacuum in the formation with a warm body, which we'll talk more about later. I feel very strongly about this. Everywhere I work, and nationwide with agencies, whether that's with the federals, my friends in highway patrols and state police, counties, cities, you name it, tribal, wherever. I'm incensed at how cavalierly we allow burnout because we don't have the guts to step up and tell the public, if you want this level of service, this is what it costs. We just hide it by burning out employees. And folks, word gets around, I wouldn't want to join that industry. I would not want to join an industry like that. So something to think about, which brings me to public image, public trust. There are some stellar agencies here. I tell you, I look around the screen, and UL represents some pretty stellar agencies. And so I know the public trust is there. We all got to work on it every day, but it's one thing to be concerned about. Inconsistencies in the recruiting, selection, hiring process. I see it all over the place. I know places that in order to get an application, you got to have a bachelor's degree. I also know places that if you can fog a mirror, you get to be a police officer. They're out there in the world. And so the inconsistency is really not helpful. You don't see that in medical care. They don't have a different system every state they go to for how you become a physician or a nursing professional. It's those inconsistencies that become a problem. And I'll tell you plain right now on inconsistencies. There are a couple of people I would like to put out of business. One, and who thrive on inconsistencies. The employees who don't want to be held accountable for things and want to, shop for yes, they thrive on inconsistencies, as does the media. They thrive on your inconsistencies, and also defense attorneys. Those three groups of people thrive on inconsistencies, especially in the recruiting and hiring process. Being product driven means we think we know what's right. Being market driven means asking the public what their opinions are, what's in it for them, asking prospective applicants what they want from a job. Because I know every agency represented right here, and every one of you have extraordinary things to offer to people who work in the industry. The failure to be systematic and just being reactionary. Again, I talked about that with the maintenance mode versus the repair mode. I remember years ago, for those of you up in the Skagit Valley, you might know the little town of Cedro-Woolley. And years ago, many years ago, I was asked to help that community through the strategic planning process. And I it was a fun project for me until a former elected official lied to me, and I fired myself and haven't looked back. However, one of the things I found as they're out looking to grow, they want to have growth out in the community. It's more annexations and whatever. That's all well and good. I like it. Although I will tell you, anytime you do that, you probably want to ask how many more police officers are going to take to provide services in that annexed area. I also know places where the communities have tripled in population over the past 20 years, but they still have the number of police officers they had in 1990. There's a problem with that. Well, what I found in Cedro-Woolley was, while they're all excited about annexing and everything shiny and new, city council got excited about it. There were still septic tanks in the downtown business area of Cedro-Woolley, and nobody wanted to ask the public for more money on their watch to fix that because it was expensive. Well, you and I know it gets more expensive every year if you don't. The same thing applies to your staffing levels. We've got to be able to step up and say, as the community grows, we've got to index this quite differently and get out of the repair mode. We talked about succession planning. I won't spend a lot of time on that. The standards for this industry are inconsistent from Washington to Oregon to Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. There's a whole lot of inconsistencies. There are places that if you and I don't know what some of you found who have done laterals outside of your own home state, but I heard a case recently that somebody with 3 or 4 years of experience in one state went and they sent the guy back through the academy again. Oh, please, that's not helpful. So consistency there would be helpful as well. One of the things that I think we ought to consider here, and some of y'all aren't going to like this, but you can't hit me, so we'll talk about it. When I left my folks' farm outside of Salem, Oregon, many years ago, I went out and I got some training, and then I went and I found a job. Law enforcement is one of the few careers on this planet that you give me a job and then you pay for me to go to training, and then you get kind of all concerned that I might have entitlement mentality. Well, some of that may well be a self-inflicted wound. We'll talk about maybe how to deal with those later. I believe it's a factor in recruiting, though. There are also on this list of things that could blow us off course is flawed logics. One is a flawed staffing algorithm. We've got to get this job down to a human-sized chunk of work. Those of you who've been around for a long time, I look around the room and many of you have, those who've been around for a long time, you've labored under this artificial officer per thousand algorithm, and it's insane. It makes no sense at all. We've got to get it down to a human-sized chunk of work based upon workload, calls for service workload, or something like that. Many of you have heard me rant about that in executive and sergeant's academies. Until we change the staffing algorithm, and that starts to drive chain of command and span of control and a whole bunch of other things. Until we do that, I'm not sure I'd want to join your industry either. The other thing is the flawed funding algorithm. I won't go into a whole long rant on that one, but I do know that we've reached a point in America where you can get a pizza delivered to your house probably faster than you can get a police officer. Why? Because A, they don't base their staffing, pizza companies don't base their staffing on population, they base it on workload. And two, they dedicate some people to do that. So long as law enforcement, unlike fire, schools, transportation, that are not in the general fund, as long as law enforcement is in the general fund of a county, a city, or a state, people will continue to play political football in prioritizing law enforcement. Well, what message does that give prospective applicants? Hey, Eric Bush, I want to hire you, but you only get to work here until somebody does something stupid and then we got to lay you off. That's what it really means. And so evening this out, now I see the Deputy Chief of Sparks, Nevada. Good morning, ma'am. Good to see you. Until we can fix that, there is going to be a sine wave of funding, layoffs, hire people, layoffs, hire people. Just so you know, some of you have never met me, I am an advocate, perhaps overly stridently, of separate law enforcement taxing districts for every sheriff's office and police department I work with in the United States. And anybody who says, oh my God, we couldn't do that. What if they screwed it up? Well, I don't know. Why don't you ask the director of your local cemetery district or a fire chief or school superintendent how it works? We could make that occur. And evening out the funding so we don't have these, the pendulum swinging quite so much. I would not want to join an unstable industry. I wouldn't do it. I worked in healthcare. See the difference? I already talked about this one. I'll illustrate it here so you can kind of get a common picture of what I'm talking about. Typically, when we're hiring somebody, it's because there is a hole in this formation and we've got to go find a warm body to stick into it. And so we're constantly playing catch-up ball with staffing. True strategic planning would say, what is the city of, what is the city of Poulsbo going to look like 10 years from now? You know, in 20, or even 20, oh darn, Steve, in 2031. What is the demographics going to look like? What is the population going to look like? What is the anticipated calls for service going to look like, depending on that array of the demographics? And let's design a police department to look like that, to service that population, so that now when we're hiring against the ideal chart of organization, rather than this, we still got septic tanks in the downtown core business area because it costs too much. This, folks, is where I think you have an opportunity as we move forward with figuring out what's going on with recruiting and retention. We got a whole bunch of people who are turning this simple process into a very complex process unnecessarily. And I think we need to engage them in shortening this process a bit more. And I'll talk about it in a little bit. And then this other one, the reputation that some agencies get out there in the world, protecting people who shouldn't be working in law enforcement, that's got to stop, folks. We're going to recruit highly qualified folks who want to help you move forward. And we can do a class on that one another time. The other logic that is flawed is this, and it has to do with what I hope we'll do here starting today, and we'll be able to build on it over time. One way to look at information, one way to look at this problem, one way to look at the future, one way to look at the past is known as deductive logic. Now, let me illustrate that. Let's say we're about to do next year's budget. So we go look at the past, right? We take last year's budget and the budget before that, and we go through them. We say, you know what? Let's go through line item by line item, add a little here, subtract a little there, and that'll be next year's budget. Well, folks, you know what that means? I know two things. If you use past data to extrapolate the future will look pretty much like the past. We weren't doing it particularly well then, and now we're going to do some more of it or less of it, whatever. I tend to do the absolute opposite logic in my guidance to organizations. The first thing I want to know is, what do we want this thing to, what do we want this thing to look like when it's all done? What is the objective? What is the destination? And then we can say, well, you know what we've been doing, and this is kind of a convoluted thing, but if we do this, we'll get a little closer to the ideal objective. And if we do this, we might have some resources, get a little closer to that objective. So we're always taking action toward the ideal outcome rather than living in the past. So I have an objective in here that I want to have you all have some input into. And we need to figure out, how will we know we're there? Some success indicators. Those will define there for everybody. Then I think we can start figuring out, well, who's gonna take, what action do we need to take to start to get there? Who's going to do it? When is it going to be done? And are there some budget implications to getting there? So given this right here, I propose that the objective we rally around, folks, is right here. The objective for all of us involved in recruiting is to achieve our community-based objectives by maintaining a sufficient quantity of qualified applicants. We got to keep people in the queue always. How will we know we've done that? We'll know we're a success when we can fill any commission position within. We got to figure out what that is, so we have a common system here. Personally, I have seen that it's possible to do that in 90 days, to get a commissioned officer hired in 90 days. I'll come back to that. We'll know we're a success in this objective when we fill a corrections position or detention, whichever, within X days of an opening or an anticipated opening. When we fill any non-commissioned position, and I mean by that support services, whether that's you all in communications, records, evidence, wherever that is. We'll know we're a success when a minimum of 90% of our new hires successfully complete the training. Initial training, basic academy for law enforcement, for example. You know, a few years ago on this topic, I was asked to do a little bit of as I look back on it, was an intervention, but then it was just a consulting project. But I was asked to find out, there was a regional communication center in Montana, and I was asked to find out why we're hemorrhaging people. We get people in here and it takes forever to get them, and we spend a lot of money to get them, and they don't say. And we need to know why. And so I went there and I, asked a bunch of questions, and I visited with dispatchers at 2 a.m. and 3 p.m. and went to some of their meetings. And you know what I found out? I found out that the couple of people they had doing training for new hires did not differentiate between training and hazing. And I asked one of these people, what is your job? And she said, well, my job is to wash as many of these losers out of this program as possible who don't meet our standard. And I said, well, no, ma'am, I don't think that's your job at all. I think your job is to help as many of these people be successful as possible. And I'll tell you, you have a really expensive addiction. Let me tell you what I mean by that, ladies and gentlemen. From the time we recruit somebody, get them selected, get them through basic academy, get them through the equivalent, whether that's support services or commission, through the field training program, before they can ever spend their first day on the job. For support services, we've already spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $75,000 of the people's money. And if they leave for toxic reasons, well, we got to replace that $75,000. For the average trooper, I don't know, Cleve, if y'all even have ever thought about this one, but what I find for folks out there is somewhere between $100,000 and $120,000 before you ever get them there. Chief Scarpon, do you have a thought about that? Have you ever analyzed that one?
The 100,000, 120, that's an easy number to get to.
That's pretty easy. So folks, when we lose people because of toxic cultures or for whatever reason, if we don't bring qualified people there and keep them, we're wasting the people's money. And I don't want to see that headline in the newspaper. I don't think you do either. So we want to make sure that a minimum of our new hires successfully complete the initial training, that they successfully complete the equivalent of the FDEP program or post-hire training. And that I proposed that we'd know we're a success when there's not a gap between when people leave and when new hires replace them, because that little period of time right there is a loss of service to the people that we're supposed to be keeping safe around here. And so all the more reason why I recommend we consider doubling up. There is a big difference between suspects that may be interested or we think kind of fit the model of folks who want to be in law enforcement or government or public safety, wherever. There's a big difference between suspects and prospects. You see, it's the prospects group that's the hiring pool. And so what I would hope we find ways to do in starting today and ensuing workshops is how do we make that a larger block there? So from the suspects out in our community, and yeah, I know my commission friends, I'm not talking about those guys you have in the backseat of your vehicle. All the suspects that may want to come into the industry, so we have a good idea of the prospects so we can turn those folks into folks that we hire. Although, some of the anecdotal stuff I hear out there in the world is the pool tends to be smaller than in previous decades. I absolutely disagree, and I'll show you something in a minute to show you that. That fewer prospects are making it through the entire process from application to job offer. I don't know, that may be true one agency here and there, but I don't think it's true everywhere. Let's just take a look at some things here. Folks, every year, including this past one, 4 million, about 4 million people graduate from college every year. They're going somewhere. They're not going into your industry. Why? Well, I don't think we know because we haven't asked them. That curve of college graduates is going up every year. So, the pool out there of suspects is still large and getting larger. High school, same way, folks. 3,209,000 people graduated from high school in 2020. And so I think the pool of suspects is growing. What we got to do is how do we turn some of those into prospects? Industries by share. Your industry, police, it says here is growing at a rate of 2.1% every year. So there is growth here. Justice, public order, and public safety agencies, those are growing. By gender, I don't know if y'all can see that. More women are getting into this industry. And you're going to have copies of these slides. So the yearly wage on the average nationwide is about $70,500 there. But ladies and gentlemen, this needs to be fixed. Your city council needs to understand it, your county commissioners, and all the other folks out there who are the policy making legislative bodies. We got to fix this this inequity between genders on salaries. You want to be attracted to people who gone elsewhere, might want to look at that. I have a slide on here, what's been tried. You know, I've seen the recruiting presidents at colleges and university and recruiting fairs and all those. Even I've seen dumbing down the standards, and a couple of y'all I'm going to ask to respond to that one. That absolutely cannot happen, folks. We just cannot allow that anywhere. I look at what's been tried, and I don't mean this to sound harsh or like I don't understand what y'all do. The preponderance of video recruiting videos that I see for law enforcement focus solely on people in tactical gear running around in SWAT outfits, skulking around in the dark with light bars and sirens and all that stuff, when that's about very low frequency things that you do in your industry, very low frequency. And so we might want to consider expanding that to talk about some of the other career opportunities there are. And at the same time, making sure that some of the jobs that are high risk, that we are recruiting for those as well. All I know is that this is Steve, so you know you can whack me when I see the one trick pony thing ain't working. It hasn't worked in 100 years, so we need to change that. Some of the things I found have worked, and I don't know what's worked for y'all, but some of the volunteer programs, like the COPS programs, you know, citizen-oriented policing, we have a bunch of them here where I live. They really free up commission time so the commission folks can work on those things they are uniquely qualified to do, and leave some of the other stuff. A great frustration for those of you who aren't exposed to this every day, as am I and my friends here. Out there in the world, folks, we've got some folks who went to a basic academy. They got a very specific commission, or they got a very specific job title as a corrections officer. And yet out in the field, we got some pretty highly trained commissioned clerks doing things with data collection and all kinds of stuff that hasn't anything to do with what they thought they went to university for, or they went to basic academy for. And we wonder why we got a recruiting and retention problem. The wellness policing, certainly I see that happening a lot. I don't know, Ron Harding and Eric, if you guys up in Marysville, Bow, I know Jerry Dodd did a lot of that with satelliting social workers with commissioned people in the field. If you guys are into that, and you can chat about that a bit. I don't know what any of the rest of you are doing, because I'm stupid. I can't keep track of all that stuff. I'd like to know what hasn't worked, because so many of you really tried a lot out there. It just hasn't worked. I'd like to get this down for a discussion of what you really think the core problem is, because what I see, and it may be an overly harsh indictment, I see folks trying to solve symptoms rather than trying to solve the real core problems. which is why I wanted to volunteer some time to do this as well. I think if we're going to turn these things around to position law enforcement, and I want to clarify, when I use that term, it's all inclusive. Those of you who work in records, dispatch, evidence, jails, the road, the street, I include everybody. Is there a changing role for law enforcement that we might take advantage of? And if so, what is that role and how might we take advantage of it? Some additional strategies. I think it's important for your community in mind to know that our agency recruits 24/7, 365 days a year. We never stop recruiting, ever. We're not going to lower the qualifications bar so we can get warm bodies into this. You don't see people lowering the bar for medical school. It don't work that way. If you want to be a true career calling, you don't be lowering the standards. We've got to shorten the selection process, and I don't mean gut it. I can let people like Terry Gallagher and a couple of others who talk about what you're finding out there with backgrounds. But I will tell you this. Some of you heard this story. One of our daughters and her husband met in college. They graduated from college. They did very well. They went off on a nice holiday to Rarotonga in the Cook Islands. They came back, got their house set up, and they came and stayed with us when Susan and I lived in Hood River, Oregon, up in the mountains. And they stayed for 10 days, and I always have a very fond memory of that time with them. And one day my son-in-law, they were there for 10 days. One day my son-in-law were down at the foot of my property cutting brush. No, Greg, I'll tell you what, we were drinking alcohol and operating really sharp machinery. And so we down there working, and I turned to my son-in-law on a break and I said, you guys have done such a great job. What's next? And he said, I have, when we go back next week, I have an interview with a company, and I'm really excited about it. I made the first 4 rounds of cuts. I'm sorry, the first 3 rounds of cuts, and I'm there for my 4th interview. And I stepped back and I said, I'll never tell you how to run your life. I just won't do it. And I won't judge you. But, one of the things that Susan and I really admire about you is you're a decisive guy. Did you just tell me you're going back for a 4th round of interviews? And he said, yeah. And I said, Kyle, what might that company be telling you about their ability to make a decision? And he stepped back and said, oh my God, I wouldn't last a week. You know what he did, folks? He didn't go to that 4th round of interviews. He went to a place where they could make a decision. They hired him, and he's now an executive vice president with a very large financial institution. I know of places out there, from the day you get an application for law enforcement until you get a job offer, might be as much as 6 months. What, if people think they're hanging on a hook out there waiting for us to, the decisive people are hanging on a hook waiting for us to get the bureaucracy in place? No. So we got to shorten this process, cut out every unnecessary form, meeting, group, whatever it is, between making sure we got a good background and getting qualified people in who are decisive. One thing that I have on this list is consistency in academy doctrine as well. And that's probably a whole nother 4-hour thing, but I'll let that pass. One of the things that I am very pleased to see here is the range of folks from all over, from our friends with Wyoming Highway Patrol and their HR folks, to our friends from Nevada, Washington, Idaho, Montana. You still with me, Montana? Now we can create a regional approach rather than everybody trying to do this all by themselves. I wonder, Chief Harding, if I'm across the way, 2 communities away, and I do a bunch of backgrounds, and I have 5 qualified people, but I can only hire 2. Why do you have to go back through the process and do backgrounds on some folks who'd already passed it? Chief Gallagher, if you could at some point respond to, you'd have talked about this, about having a centralized database of background checks so we don't have to, everybody try to do this and recreate the wheel. It takes time to do that. Maybe we could cut a step out. So centralizing the pool of prospects and the use of social media. I'm not going to touch on that right there. It annoyed me when I put that together. So I'm going to put, here's a thing that I can envision as I think about brainstorming. I believe strongly that law enforcement, wherever you work there, ranks right up there as a white collar profession with attorneys, physicians, CPAs. But it's going to be an awful lot difficult for any of us to convince the public that you should be paid that way until you all believe that you are a white collar profession, not just a blue collar job within which there are professionals. It is a different thing. I can envision a statewide campaign. Let's take Washington State, for example, backed up with partners from the federal government and from WASPIC and from you name it, where there is a series of testimonials from Tara, featuring her talking about why she got into this industry to make a difference, to help others, and a testimonial from Eric and a testimonial from Adam about why he got into it. And oh, by the way, this month, Port Angeles was looking for a police officer and a dispatcher. Lacey's looking for a police officer. PENCOM's looking for 2 dispatchers. So every month there is a series of testimonials from professionals and the position openings. And to have that campaign statewide with radio, television, the internet, social media, dropping leaflets from helicopters, I don't care, but to make it reposition law enforcement as a career of choice, right up there with medical school, right up there with, even welding school. My goodness, to have it be consistent. I'll move on. My proposal is for you all to consider that we create a recruiting machine. Going it alone is time-consuming, expensive, and it's kind of a hunt and peck when you think about it. I don't know if there are other groups we need to bring into this recruiting machine over and above those I have listed, but we'll come back to it. I'd like to come away from today saying, okay, for our friends in HR, it'd be helpful to our recruiting efforts for you to continue doing the following things you're doing really well. It'd also be helpful to our recruiting efforts if you would start doing some of the following, and it'd be helpful to the recruiting efforts if you would stop doing the following. I'd like to know that also with, city, county, state legal counsel. The same with recruiters. What are they doing well? And that we can all leverage to your advantage. What would we like to see them start doing? And likewise, stop. This one's a biggie for me because if you have 2 systems, you have no system. So I'll let that one go by the wayside for a little bit. Chief Gallagher is here for his performance evaluation on this one. Are you still there? Where are you? Wherever he is. Oh, you're smiling. Good, I can move on. Colleges and universities, the same topics. Our city council, boards of commissioners, governor's offices, what can they do to help with this? I tell you what, I'd like them to stop doing, any of them, whether it's city councils, county commissions. I had a county commissioner say to me once, and it wasn't in your county, though it could have been, the sheriff's office, they're just a drain on the general fund. Now, folks, that's an idiotic thing to say. And my policy is if you let an idiot get away with saying something like that, they're going to tell another idiot. And then that idiot tells another idiot. And pretty soon you got yourself an idiot movement. And so I just make it a practice to not tolerate that. This is a highly highly professional, valued part of the infrastructure of any civilized organization. And so I'd like to know that your county defense or your county prosecutors and county commissioners and city council people aren't for their own reasons bad mouthing law enforcement. That's not helpful. It is not helpful. PIOs, they can maybe do something other than, simply and only write about the last rape suspect or drug bust that was made and start getting the word out to promote this industry as a career of choice. Our own employees, I'm maybe weird about this, but some of y'all know me, so don't be shocked. I believe that one of the most significant sources of recruiting are your own employees. And so it pains me when in cultures I know, and I'm not talking to anybody personally here, but that I know out there are employees who don't want to be here, but they're out in the community bad-mouthing the organization, bad-mouthing you as administrators and sergeants and support staff, and telling their families that. Word gets around. And so I'd like to help those people find another place to be. The rule is this: it's simple and inescapable. There is no such thing as a non-marketing employee. Terry, when you're in the Safeway checkout line, you are city government. Ricklin, when you're out there, you are Teton County. And you may be the only time some of those people have had any interaction with local government at all. And so it's really important that employees take these messages forward about a career of choice. My view with employees is, if you don't like your job, we're going to solve it internally. If we have a problem, we're going to solve it like adults. I don't want to hear about it in the Safeway checkout line or have it be a topic of a sermon at your church. That's why we have open communication in organizations. Businesses, our constituents, I believe they could do a lot more to help you all with recruiting, a lot more in recognizing where you add value. I got to tell you, for every person who makes $1 in Marysville, Washington today in their little enterprise, they ought to be thanking the law enforcement folks for creating the environment where people feel safe to come and shop in those communities. And so I think we got to do a better job of making those connections as well for recruiting purposes and a whole bunch of other purposes. So likewise, the people who pay the bills around here. Local media. Many of you have heard me talk about triangulation and the perils of triangulation. And forgive me when I do this, but I just want to make sure we are watching our language as we move forward with cultures. In every dynamic, there's those folks we'll call persecutors. They are created by people who see themselves as having no power, victims, and they are accompanied by people who want to help you, rescuers. Now, those things, when we look at fire departments, for example, fire departments have done a great job of positioning themselves as rescuers, as people who help others. And they have positioned themselves that they get the resources they need. People volunteer to be fire professionals. They have a lot of nice facilities. They have some really big, shiny stuff. In the mind of the average American, my view is that fire departments have done a great job of positioning themselves as rescuers. Law enforcement, on the other hand, I see in the media all the time, as do you, is positioned as the persecutor. I see it in the media all the time, and it's not acceptable to me, not acceptable. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine, and these are kind of transient things. You hear them every day, and you just never really stop and think about it. You just listen to it on the surface, particularly those who aren't in law enforcement. A friend of mine was a chief of police in another state, not represented here. And, there had not been an officer-involved shooting in that jurisdiction for probably a decade before he became chief. And in the first year he was chief, there were 2. And you and I, those things are going to happen. It had no connection with him being chief. It just happened. Well, I watched him at a press conference. I was in the room at the time when the media, the self-appointed rescuers of truth in the American way, shoved a camera, a bunch of them actually, in my buddy's face and said, again, persecutors, bad guys, and victims. He said, the reporter said, now, Chief, don't you think this is a case of suicide by cop? And my friend, having been through training with me, looked at the camera and said, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I am embarrassed on behalf of every journalist, and I am appalled on behalf of every person in law enforcement that you would even ask that question. You see what really happened, and you and I will never know what goes through somebody's mind when they put one of my employees in a position of having to use deadly force. You see, folks, he repositioned away from cops being seen as persecutors to say, wait a minute, something else is going on here. We've got to do a better job of repositioning this in the hearts and minds of Americans. If the only guy who's talking to the media is saying something negative, what is the public to believe? And so we need to turn that one around as well. And at some point, we'll discuss, where do we go from here? My hopes is we'll have another meeting in April. I'll pass this slide program along to you. You can go back and meet with some of your folks and complete it. We can bring it all back together and keep working this until we solve this problem. I did a little bit of research. You might be interested in going to some of these links and just checking them out about some facts about workers and other things with regard to recruiting and the job market and all that. And those are listed in here as well. So if I might go back then and listen to you all some. Is what I have designed there, would you find it helpful if we could flesh that out and continue to work it as a group? Or, I mean, I don't see anybody around the room here, I think, who thinks there's some easy answer to this. That it's a just add water thing, but would that slide program kind of help us to start to frame some of this properly? Terry Gallagher, what say you, my friend? It's good to see you again. Is there anything we need to add to that slide program, I guess, if we can ultimately turn it over to the recruiting people and they can start to use it? Sir, your mic is off, Terry. There you go.
Sorry, that took a minute. I don't think so at this point. I think the discussion that's going to follow may cause me to change my mind.
All right, get it. Well, Captain Gunther, what do you say about the slide program? We need anything you can think of we need to add in there? Any of my friends from the Highway Patrol, Wyoming Highway Patrol?
No, that looks like a great foundational start.
Captain Simmons?
I agree. I'm even more interested in the changing, I guess, that perspective from whatever it is to now to law enforcement as a career of choice and approaching different avenues that maybe we haven't done in the past. For instance, some of the things you talked about, like radio interviews and different things for each different month, and social media campaigns is another thing I wrote down, and more involvement with our communities, and even podcasts.
So a more detailed follow-on action plan, Michael, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Chief Templeman, that slide program, is there anything you would advise we add to it? Can you see why that might be useful if it was fleshed out with all this brain power and experience we got here? I'm not including myself in that, Dan.
I do think it's a good foundation as well. And also would agree that probably as we start talking about it, we'll probably think of some more aspects we can add to it.
I'm going to take notes as we begin to discuss that. I'll have to get a couple extra slides here, but I'll take some notes to start getting at those follow-on things. Where's the Marysville Chief of Police? Where are you, sir? You got a thought on this one? I don't see you on my screen. If you talk, Eric, you'll pop up so I can see you. Well, I'm sorry, if you talk with your microphone on, I can see you.
Did you get me there now?
Yes, sir, I do. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think there has to be some component about, yes, there are some things that are going to work for us overall, but each of our agencies has a different success pathway here. And I think one of the things that we have to be watching is what's working well for us. So like when we're tracking our own recruiting and hiring numbers, we have found something that you reported on there is that our people are our best referring agents. It's folks in our own organization that are driving the folks that work here next. And then right after that, it's going to be our website. So making sure that our website is up to date, that it has all of our most current things that we're offering, about who we are as a culture, how we serve the community. We're trying to do what we can to make sure we get that story out. But those two things are where we're starting here in Marysville.
And I watched those from afar, Chief. And personally, I think it's one of the things I was really glad to see you and Terry and other folks in Marysville here is I think you're doing a stellar job of that. I hope it's working for you. I think we can learn from some of those things. And every time I see that range of things you're doing, I think, geez, does Eric sleep anymore? You're doing so many great things. So good for you. What about our friends in Lewiston? Anything in that slide program we need to change or add to it? Anybody? I'm sorry. That was a question.
Yeah, I think it looks good, Steve. I agree with the others that as the discussion goes, there's probably more things that could be added. And I like the last one who spoke. I agree that agency-specific recruitment is a little bit different across, but maybe in general, there could be some, like we discussed, some things that would help us all. But there's definitely specific things within the agency that we could do better locally and within our region.
Okay. Thank you very much. What I'm looking forward to, gang, is when we're done with today, getting this slide program out to you, have you do maybe a little, whatever it takes internally, complete some of those slides and those bring them all back together next time and see what we've got. I think that'd be really great. Deputy Chief Edmondson, you're being very patient with me as always, ma'am. I appreciate it. Anything, does that slide program kind of start to address a framework for you that would be useful? Any changes you'd like to make?
Well, can you all hear me okay? Because I was having audio issues earlier.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We hear you.
I honestly just went through the list of everything that we've been doing, what we've tried and didn't work, including spending $50,000 on a marketing firm that made all of those recruitment videos of all of our taxable assets that didn't do anything for us. So we even worked in like geofencing to like target specific laterals. So in speaking with Chief Crawford and just our team here, it's really about focusing on people, why we want them to live in our area and why we want them to serve our community with us while they live here. And just what does that look like and how do we help that for us? So that's where we're going. So I'm excited to see, I don't want to reinvent the wheel, and I know nobody else here does either. So we're in a very unique valley here, and we actually do play very well in the sandbox with the rest of our law enforcement partners here. But we are all dipping into the same pool of applicants. So
Excellent.
That's the biggest concern right now, is that we are watching our applicant numbers dwindle. Now the applicants themselves are very qualified and we're seeing a lot of success out of them, but the numbers are scary. We've gone from hundreds down into like the tens and 20s. And like, we just had a January testing. We had 9 people show up for the physical. It's January and it was cold, but it was 9. So it's scary. It's scary to watch, which I'm sure everyone is experiencing that on some level.
So one of the things I heard you imply, you didn't say this specifically, but I will add another slide on all the folks who are like the business boosters, Chamber of Commerce groups who are recruiting residents to the area might want to talk about these issues and job opportunities, career choice as well. So I'll add a slide for those folks. And what I'm hoping, my intent with those various slides, folks, of the various groups, is for you to complete those internally and then go meet with some of those people, have that discussion and get their commitments and add some slides to it. General Bush, I'm sorry, Eric Bush, I can't get out of the habit of that, sir. Do you have a thought of this?
Well, again, without echoing some of the things that have already been said, I think it's a great start point, but I think there's also some seams here that are going to need to be addressed to tie some of these different topics together.
Please, sir. Please, I'll jot them down while you're talking.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I think is important is, we've got a diverse group here online, different police departments, different policing styles in different communities. Even within one community, you'll have different neighborhoods that have different expectations. So when you look at it from that angle, departments are going to want to recruit for a cultural fit. And it's not just internal to the police department itself, but it's a cultural fit for the community. Because if you're going to invest that $120,000, you're going to want somebody who's going to stick around for a while. Because, truth be told, you might have somebody who wants to get into law enforcement, so they go to agency B, not necessarily for the attractive pay and benefits, but to get their foot in the door. And then later on, they maybe think they want to go to agency A. But if you can attract for cultural fit for a community and get them into, and if you're agency B, it doesn't pay as much, for instance, then maybe perhaps you can bring them in and they'll feel more welcome. There'll be a better fit overall, long term, better potential that you'll have better retention with that particular individual. So I'm not really sure how you capture that for the different agencies, but I think every agency is going to be different. So when you look at these different areas that we're examining, I think one agency might rate one area of more importance than the other. And then there's some, of course, the past experience of what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked in the past. But again, you got to apply that deductive logic that you talked about earlier, where you're looking at, okay, well, maybe it didn't work in the past, but are we in a place where this is going to work in the future? My former department, very rural cowboy town, and but now it's the home of the largest Facebook data center complex in the United States. So big change in the culture in the community, and different change in the type of people we want to recruit long term. So those are just some of the things that kind of stuck out to me. There was something else, and I'll think about it in a minute. But I think this is a real good first start. Oh, the other thing. So when we talk about the challenges of having just the overall environment we're dealing with today about, why does somebody want to be a cop? I mean, that's like the number one question. I mean, why would anybody want to be a cop today? A lot of people are asking that question. So how do we counter? You talked right towards the end of your spiel, Steve. You talked about repositioning that narrative. I think that needs to happen, but it's got to happen at more just the police chief or the sheriff level. It's got to happen. I mean, it's got to happen at the national level, and how we accomplish that is probably a topic for a different philosophical conversation, but it can start with our jurisdictions, our mayors, our county commissioners, where we need to help them, give them the tools to reposition that narrative for law enforcement, so they can in turn help us recruit quality candidates that are going to stick around for a long time and reduce this constant turnover and the potential of hiring subpar candidates because the pool is just too thin, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir. I have those One, the recruiting for cultural fit, and then the other, just sort of repositioning the brand name. And I'll note those as well. I absolutely concur that it's larger than any one individual or agency in this room. We got to bring a bunch of other people into this who need to carry the flag forward as a career choice for this as a career choice. That currently I just don't see they're doing it. Where was I? Chief Jenkins, slide program making sense to you? Do we need to add anything?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great start. A couple of things, and forgive me if you mention it and I didn't catch it, but I'd like to hear a conversation about using a pre-employment testing service as a recruitment tool. And then the other topic I think that will be interesting to hear out, you mentioned our profession where someone gets a job and then we train them rather than the other way around. And I know that there's different models out there. I previously worked in California where applicants can put themselves through an academy and then make themselves more hireable. And in Washington, we don't have that. And so I'd kind of like to flesh that out a little bit more and talk about maybe some pros and cons of that and what models look good.
Absolutely, I concur. I know. I believe that Michigan has a program that you actually go through the 2-year associate program. So you get your associate degree, but you also get your certification, and they give you, Gary, I have a friend and he gets a license to practice law enforcement. It's just like a driver license, and he's quite proud of that. The thing that I want to say without offending too many of you, but again, most of you are my friends. Folks, on that point that Gary was talking about, there's no such thing as a free puppy. And we need to understand that to look at how do we turn this around. The other question you mentioned, Chief Jenkins, hey, Eric and Marysville, you all are doing some pre-employment testing. Didn't I see something like that on LinkedIn a day or so ago?
I want to punt that one to my commander, Adam. He's going to run that program tomorrow. He can talk about it.
Is Adam here somewhere? Where is he?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Was that the one you were tagging, Chief?
Yes. Yeah, Adam, you want to tell him about what we're doing? That's stole it from other places, used it other places too. It works well.
Yeah. What we do is when we're getting ready to do oral boards and have those oral board sessions, we put out a thing to the public and to our applicants that are invited to test that we're going to do how to prepare for law enforcement testing. We go over our department, we talk about our department, our culture, why you want to work here, and then we talk about how to be successful in the oral boards, types of questions you might get, not the exact questions, but the themes, how to answer them, what good answers look like, what bad answers look like, how to prepare. So when they come in for oral boards, they're much more prepared. It seemed like the way we were always doing it, it was kind of a secret that you didn't know how to be successful on an oral board until you did it and failed at it a couple times. And it's not a secret. And my team and I, we just came up with this idea to basically tell people how to be successful. And we've seen some success on it. We've done it twice. Tomorrow will be our third one. And we have people in the process that, driven from all over Western Washington to come up. And it kind of allowed us to start building that loyalty. They really like that. And we've seen some success with it. So we're going to keep doing it. A way to get out there with the community and kind of just tell people how to be prepared so they're more prepared when they come in for the oral boards and can be more successful. So we have a bigger applicant pool.
It is brilliant. And certainly I can see for those of you who, and again, Commander, if I'm oversimplifying this, just whack me, but it's a very similar phenomenon to what we do to create informed ambassadors with citizens academies. And if you don't have one, gang, get one. That's a petri dish that we start germinating and growing some of those people you need for yes votes for your budget and other places. So yeah, I'll go on. Field Marshal Betzinger, are you with me, ma'am? Anything in that? Was that slide program need to have anything added to it, or maybe of use to you all in Teton County?
I think it was good. I think one thing maybe just to note that stood out to me on the time frame of backfilling positions
Yes, ma'am.
is take into account the training period. Because backfilling, we can have somebody in the door for day one. That may still take, several months potentially. But then like for our dispatch, it's going to take 6 months for them to actually be filling a shift. So if they,
Yeah, that may have been an error in the way I phrased it in the slide. I'm talking about getting somebody ready to go to the academy when I was talking about that time frame. So all the background stuff that it takes to get there. Keep on talking, and I'll go find that slide and modify it.
yeah, I just, I guess the way I was reading it, it was more like starting on day one, because I guess for dispatch, we don't go to an academy first. So it's starting with field training first. But I think everything else is good start so far.
All right.
Hey, Steve, a comment on that one. So it goes counter to intuition to hire beyond your authorized amount. But what I see is city managers, mayors becoming more comfortable with this idea of, oh, you look at your organization, you know how many people you turn over on average every year. And in those areas, you should be authorized to overhire so that you don't have that gap in people that you're losing. And if you're working with a stakeholder who isn't comfortable with that concept, we have to work to get them more comfortable with that concept. That's how we close that gap quicker.
Yeah, it's a trust issue, but it's also, I hope you'll concur, Chief. It first of all, it's just good business, and second of all, in the long run, it's less expensive.
Exactly.
And so we got to do a better job of showing, like the Wyoming legislature, if we double staff some of these things, particularly when we anticipate, that Captain Gunther is going to retire 5 years. Well, maybe about 3 years from now, we ought to start thinking about a replacement trooper and hiring that person right then. It's cheaper to do it that way.
And Steve, I will just toss in there too that, like in our particular case, it's not, we've got the positions, we've never been able to fill the positions.
Yes, ma'am.
So we've been allotted, say 16 positions for the last 10 years, and we've never filled all 16 positions at one time. So we've got the funding, we've got the positions open, we just haven't even been able to fill them, let alone fill additional. Like if we got the 16 full, we would have additional to backfill that, but we haven't got there yet. So
yeah,
lots of work.
I don't know. I concur. I don't know if this, it's probably one of those strategic issues, but I don't know if this applies in Jackson or in Teton County. Help me with it. I know of places out there, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take Blaine County, Idaho, up around Sun Valley, Ketchum, in that area. My friends who are there tell me that the average price of a home in that area, including the 400 square foot tract homes, is somewhere around $1.2 million. Law enforcement people start at about $38,000 a year. Folks, these people can't even afford to live in the very community that they are raised their right hand and sworn to protect. That's a problem. I don't know. Is that a significant issue in Teton County?
Yeah, that's probably our top issue for all departments is housing. Most of our workforce is commuting an hour plus to surrounding counties, which then means we're taking employees from their departments. We may pay more, but they're living in the other counties and commuting to Teton County.
Sometimes I think we'd be better off to buy an apartment complex, give them a home, and have them live here. That may prove to be less expensive in the long run.
I would add, in that community issue that's being talked about there, it's not only cost of housing, which we face up here in the Olympic Peninsula, it's appropriate medical services within our community.
Absolutely.
It's also schooling in our community.
Yep.
And so there's a whole, like, that's at least a trifecta, if not greater, of reasons that people aren't necessarily moving to our community that have nothing to do with the work that we're trying to do or the profession that we're trying to work on. It's just getting people into our out in the middle of nowhere, end of the world community. So it's a draw for some people, but it's not for a lot.
Thank you, Carl. That's really good. I made a note of that one as well.
Steve, can I throw something in there real quick?
Please jump in.
Just to kind of pull that all around, because it's all relative, is that the inability or incapability to come to those stakeholders, whether that be the county of Teton County or those areas where housing and cost of living isn't allowing us to put people in place to do that job. But also with the long-term issues of going back to your earlier statement, one of your slides about being in love with the disease that's killing us. For so many years, we hear, it's these things are out of our control. The legislative body or the mayor's office or the city council all control our compensation packages, and ultimately there's nothing we can do about it. And so I'd like to see in your slide presentation maybe a little more information or strategies or therapy, if you might say, efforts to work as an entity or agencies or a collateral group to work on those stakeholders and work on our own mindset to come to the table and make sure people understand what's going on, as well as how we can come together and police their communities, because we're having a huge struggle with that, I think, across the board.
I absolutely concur, Captain. I think that, and again, it's not everywhere. I don't see this particularly with Highway Patrol, and I don't see it in Poulsbo or Pullman or any of the rest of the places represented with my friends here. But from what you described, it's not a big leap to start having bunker mentality and everybody's out to get us and woe is us victim think, and that does not help the issue. And I think that I would hope that those who would be leaders in this industry would not fall into the victim mentality, and get out there and really carry the staff forward on this. Hey, Eric Tung, you're being very quiet and it's frightening me. Sir, can you weigh in on this slide program?
Hi there. Yeah, I actually like that the captain brought up our tendency to circle the wagons and go into victim mentality. I know that it's affected our culture and our morale. So when we talk about recruitment, it's hard not to focus in on retention, and that's very related, but very other spider webbing effect of themes that we need to address.
Okay. Anything you want to add to that slide program in terms of, we don't have details yet. I'm just going to be sure we get the architecture down, and then we can begin to fill this thing out and use it here and there. So anything you want to add to it, Eric, jump in. Hey, Jake, you're being real quiet too. Can you jump in on this for us, please?
Sure. I was kind of interested in how you were talking about, maybe we need to ask why we're not getting applicants, because without that information, we're kind of taking guesses at how we can do our recruiting. So when we have so many numbers that we can draw from, why are we seeing such low numbers in our profession? So that was something that kind of stood out to me.
It could be that we need to go to colleges and universities and ask them if we can survey people who are within a year of graduating, and do the same thing at some selected high schools. Would that kind of make sense, Commander?
Yeah, I think, we've gone to job fairs and all the typical recruiting things, and sometimes those job fairs are just very generalized job fairs, and we're hoping that, we're going to attract some people to our profession. But when we see them just walk by our table, for example, maybe we should engage and ask them, why they're not considering law enforcement. But there could be a number of ways we can go about it. I imagine we could something brainstorm.
Yes, sir. I think, Commander, coupled with, again, I don't want to diminish the singularly often dangerous role that you all have on the commission side. But I'm not sure everybody knows what the hell you do that isn't involving crime. I just don't know that the average public knows that. So we got to do a better job of that messaging as well, if that makes sense. Terry Gallagher, something came up earlier about the was the pre-employment thing. Can you share with us, to the extent you can, what you observe from your vantage point? The quality of the folks, where you think they came from, any of those things that might be helpful as we adjust our recruiting efforts as well. And again, I'm not sure everybody was here when you introduced what you do, Chief.
So I made a few notes, and I'll just go through them in no particular order. I'm a retired police chief. I spent 32 years in Port Angeles. I've got some experience in the military. I often think that as long as we have a retired general here, that we sometimes should ask ourselves what the Army does to recruit soldiers, because the Army doesn't advertise that you're going to live in a hole in Afghanistan covered in fleas and eat crappy food. They approach it in a different way, and apparently they're successful. One of the things I know is that the people that we want to hire are the same people that everyone else wants to hire. People that are educated to a certain level, people that have a good work ethic, people that have personal integrity. We're not just competing amongst ourselves, we're competing, I think, with a national job market. And I think that, Steve, if you look at your slide presentation, you might want to talk a little bit about short-term solutions, going to the college job fair, but then long-term solutions as well. One of the things I noticed as a police chief is 4 of the officers I had working with me or working for me, I was their DARE officer at one point. So their first exposure to me was when they were 10 years old. Well, that was always interesting to me because it told me that maybe we should reach further back in time to build our candidate pool. That maybe if you're not involved in a Boy Scout troop or an Explorer program, you should be, because many people start to form career decisions that early in life. I can tell you that the candidates I've talked to hundreds of candidates. I've been in, I don't know how many organizations since I retired 6 years ago. 6 years ago this month, in fact. And when I asked people, General Bush mentioned asking people, why do they want to be a cop? Well, that's a question asked in every background I've ever seen. And I've often thought that you could do a master's thesis if you would just take the time to read 500 backgrounds. The amount of information that's probably contained in them is incredible. But when I ask people, why do you want to be a cop? They don't say, I want to be a SWAT officer. You sometimes hear them say, I want to be a detective. But the most common thing they say today is they want to be involved in community service. They want to serve their community. And the other thing you hear consistently is, I want to be a member of a positive, forward-thinking team. They always talk about camaraderie and how valuable it is to them to be part of a team that's productive and to work in an environment that's something less than toxic. And I think Seattle's a great example because one of the other things I hear quite often when I talk, especially to laterals, when I talk to lateral officers, why are you going from point A to point B? I want to go somewhere where I'm valued. I don't feel valued in my organization. So oftentimes, well, I don't know about oftentimes, but sometimes the candidates' perceptions are flawed, but I think the answers to those questions should inform our recruiting efforts, rather than the focus in law enforcement on that portion of our work that is just an infinitesimal thing, the violence or the flashy lights and all that. We should, I think, emphasize more the opportunity to serve our communities, to do good in our communities.
If I could interject there, Chief, while you're looking at your next note. I can only tell you as a guy in the private sector out here, folks, trying to build an industry based upon low, very low frequency events is not a sustainable business model. Does that make sense? That is not a sustainable business model. So we got to do those kind of things Terry's mentioning there. The other side of it is to amplify that. Whenever I've asked thousands of people, probably close to 15,000 now during the course of my work with public safety agencies, whenever I ask them, well, why did you get into this business? Why did you get into this business? They say the same thing that Chief Gallagher just mentioned. They'll say, to help others, to make a difference. And my question becomes, then why in the hell aren't we measuring that in law enforcement agencies? Why isn't that included in people's job descriptions? Why don't we talk about that when we do your performance evaluation? No, we're off measuring things that have really no relevance in the mind of the taxpayer. Most of us not worth a bucket of warm spit, but we don't measure those things that got people into this industry to begin with. And so retention is really important. And the other thing, Terry, I remember in Port Angeles, and it's happened in Wyoming as well, and here and there. When I ask somebody, why did you choose Port Angeles as an example? A person told me years ago, well, because I know some people from there who work in the police department, and they were always talking about what a great job it was and how much they enjoyed being with their coworkers. And I thought, I want to be part of that. That was huge.
The only other comment I would make is, I think the perception that law enforcement is somehow hated today is flawed.
I agree.
I believe that the community of Port Angeles loves their police department. And I find that to be true as I move across the state. It's obviously not true everywhere, but I believe that that's another thing that we could emphasize in our recruiting efforts. If you want to work somewhere where people value you, where people still admire the police, public safety, whatever, Port Angeles is a good place to be.
We've proven that, Terry, with many, many market research surveys I've done over the years to show that the overwhelming majority of people in any jurisdiction I've ever done a survey in overwhelmingly support law enforcement. That just kind of doesn't get as much press though, The other side of what the chief has mentioned to us is something that I just get annoyed on y'all's behalf about. The few negative things seem to escalate into torches and pitchforks and whatever. Last year, there were somewhere in the neighborhood of, don't quote me, excuse me.
I just want you to know that I'm the guy that gave Eric Scarpon's dad a job. So.
Yeah, he appreciates that very much.
Yeah.
Oh man. A little thing about positioning, folks, that I would really ask, let's all do what we can to stop this, to make this stop out there in the world. And it's a tiny one, but it has larger ramifications to literally everything that is negative about law enforcement. I'd like to add some more facts and not just pass by those. Last year in America, there was somewhere in the neighborhood of, don't quote me, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 people in America, United States, who lost their lives in their interactions with the police. And I see the torches and pitchforks and the people out to defund the police, which, by the way, is not a movement. It is not a movement. But I see them out there champing at the bit, and a bunch of jackbooted thugs wantonly killing poor innocent Americans. Well, let's put that in perspective, folks. Last year and every year before that, and every year before that, medical malpractice in America kills 200,000 Americans. And the media yawns, the community yawns. Nobody's out saying, let's defund healthcare. I don't see the people's names in the paper. I don't see torches and pitchforks out after doctors and all those folks. something's going on. And I got to tell you, present company accepted. I mean, I see friends of mine who are chiefs and senior decision makers. Y'all are doing great, or I wouldn't have invited you. But I was thinking out there in across the nation, there's an abysmal lack of leadership that just accept, okay, I guess we're bad guys who killed 1,000 people, without bringing the other real facts to the table here in perspective. So please consider that. Lieutenant Hudson, you are still one of the prettiest men in Montana. Please weigh in on this for me, will you, please?
Boy, that kind of made me blush there, Steve, and I don't do that very often. I had a couple notes here when we talk about silos and decision makers. We put together a public safety group, which actually just met right before your kickoff today. And we have our sheriff, chiefs of police, fire chiefs, county attorney, and a county commissioner in that group. And we put that group together about 3 months ago to talk about exactly this stuff on how to recruit. How can we recruit from out of county? Because right now nobody can afford to buy a house here. And to talk about all of those things. And today, for example, we talked about, is it time for the county to buy an apartment complex? You know, we cannot find the people. And the other point on that is we don't know where our local people have went in the job force because our young folks are gone. The folks that are moving here have enough money that I guess they don't need to work. So our idea is next month we're going to have all the guidance counselors for all the different high schools in one room where we can talk to them about what we're trying to find and have them be our talent scouts for us. Because there's got to be people out there that need a job. But so far, McDonald's, our local grocery stores, nobody can find those folks, and we need to figure out where they went to.
That's really important, and it also brings up that notion, Zay, of the attrition of kids who, they grew up in a Valley County, and they get called up the big town in Missoula or somewhere else, and they don't want to work in the same county anymore. That's a hard one. I was. Jeremy, you're off doing also the safety and training. You're doing some recruiting as well. Do you have a thought about this? The question is about the slide program, and have we got major points in there? Anything you want to add in terms of the architecture of the thing, sir?
No, I think you hit on a lot of the good things that some of the things that we've tried, some of the things that we could try. A few things on the state side or a state agency that I've seen some positive feedback would be the fact that our testing process is less lengthy than what it was in years past. Now, once they start the testing here in Cheyenne, they'll only wait for about a month and a half before they're offered a position. And I've seen that on the state side of things, a lot of folks like that. You kind of hit on that a little bit. I would like you to hit on a little bit more about a pre-cert academy. How long is too long? The reason why I ask that is because a lot of applicants that contact me that are pre-cert, they don't really tell me how long would be too long for an academy. Is there an academy that, is 8 weeks too long? Is 10 weeks too long? Or does it really matter for them to apply with an agency? And then one more quick thing for our state side of things that's really benefited the applicants. It's the fact that that they know the location that they're going to be placed once they apply and we offer them a position. And for a state agency, it seems like a lot of other state agencies do not tell them until after they're through with the academy. And a lot of our applicants are folks that are moving their family from another state to Wyoming. And so they want to know where they're going to be located, where they can start looking for housing.
Well, sir, in the same fashion, we're shopping them, they're shopping us, right?
Right.
And that's something that is really critical. Can you go back, please, if we could, to that pre-certification academy? I have a definition issue because I told you I'm stupid, right? Is that something I would go to before I apply for a job with, say, the Highway Patrol, and then you all send me through the basic academy? Or what were you talking about in terms of the order of operations of that?
So before COVID hit, we used to run 2 separate academies. One would be that they would go to our state law enforcement academy for, I think, 12 weeks or so, and then they would come back to a Highway Patrol academy, a trooper academy. And then that would be where the pre-certs would kind of join the folks that just got out of the state academy, and they would all be together to be commissioned, 12 weeks later. Since the COVID has struck all of us, a lot of our time has been combined with pre-certs as well as non-certified folks. And so it's a longer academy. But I know that Captain Gunther and a few of the other folks have tossed around the idea of maybe a pre-cert academy, what that would look like, talk or spoke with each other about it. I'm just wondering, on the back end of things, have you guys ever heard of pre-certs saying, have you heard, any type of timeline, like, hey, if you guys had an academy that was, this amount of weeks long, I would apply with you guys. But since it's this amount of time, I don't really want to do that again. I guess
Sure.
That's my question.
Yeah, everybody keep that question in mind, but are they getting paid when they're going through those academies, Jeremy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Somebody else jump on his good question there, please.
I can try.
Please do, ma'am. Please do.
So for us, for laterals, we kind of have something similar. So our academy here in Washoe County in Nevada is actually 20 weeks long. And then even though you've graduated from the academy, you still come back to an agency specific, what we call a mini academy. And that's like three to 3.5 weeks. So for us, like a lateral coming in still just does that 3.5 weeks of cleanup, but it's not essentially to teach anyone how to do like police work in general, regardless of whether or not they've come from out of state, but it's to help school them up on how they need to be a police officer here at Sparks. And then just like tactical functionality, radio traffic type, things that are, more agency specific to us, but both our recruits and our laterals experience that mini academy kind of component. I know that our state police here in Nevada do something similar where they go to the state academy and then they'll go to either like parole and probation specific, or they'll go to highway patrol specific. I'm not quite sure how long it is, but I want to say it's somewhere close to another 6 to 8 weeks, I think. But it seems like it's somewhat common to have that agency specific component so that it's more customized to what everyone is doing in your area and your community.
Similar to the more generic FTO process in many of the other organizations. Is that accurate, Tara?
That's in addition to our field training program. So our field training program is another like 16 to 18 weeks.
Okay.
So they're in training for a long time. So for us to have a viable cop on the road, it's a good year before we've got someone ready to hit the road by themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Anybody else have some thoughts on Jeremy's question? All right. Where did Walter go? Sergeant Martinez, do you have a thought on the slide program or anything else you want to throw out in the middle of this? By the way, I'm looking forward to seeing you all in April. So
yeah.
I'm excited to see you too then. No, I think it's a good foundation, good start. I'm kind of interested in, and you kind of touched on this, on ways to promote the profession. I mean, we do a lot of good work. All of us do a lot of good work, and we have businesses moving into our communities. Do we go and stand with a contractor or developer? Hey, you guys are coming in here because we made this community safe for you guys. And ideas like that, promoting ourselves that way, and through other programs. We've taken advantage of the Citizens Academies and being in the high schools and all those things as well. But just more ideas of things that we can do to promote ourselves and the profession and take credit for the good work that we do.
Absolutely. You all have an extraordinary Citizens Academy there and have for years. That's a real asset. I don't recall if I asked Chief Templeman, maybe he got distracted with something else for a moment. Jason, are you there in Cascade County? Yes, no.
Yeah, we're here.
You're echoing a bit, but you have some thoughts on the slide program, and then Chief Templeman, I'll come back to you, but do you have some thoughts on the architecture of it? Anything we need to add? Unique or particular problems in Great Falls or in the county in recruiting that we didn't talk about yet?
Benefits package. We're looking at like our benefits package and how comparable that is to other agencies. We see a decline in people applying with us because of that, but we have little to no control over it.
Okay. All right, good. Noted. Chief Templeman, thank you for your patience there. Did I touch base with you on this slide program or not? I forgot.
Yes, you did. I said it was perfect.
Tell you, sir, you got to start hiring people who have their act together. I'm not kidding you.
Yeah, no, you did already touch on me earlier. Yes.
All right, good. Thank you, sir. Ryan, please, your thoughts, sir.
I don't have anything to add, so I'm kind of learning about all this myself, so I'm kind of soaking in what everybody else is having to say. So,
all right,
thank you very much.
Good. Well, thank you, Cherry, birthday lady. From your side of the house in human resources, what guidance would you give us? Where do you see some holes that, whether that's in image or process or whatever? And is there anything else I need to add to the architecture of that slide program?
No, I think the slideshow looks good. And, as you've noticed, Marysville's, doing a really great job, I think, with a lot of things. And we are communicating with police and always thinking about what can we do differently. Because despite our best efforts, we're still trying to plug the holes. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to continuing to work with the chief and with Adam to see what else can we do to keep it going, keep the process going.
Excellent. It does get difficult. I think Casey Stengel said, if people don't want to come to the ballpark, you can't make them. And so sometimes, despite Captain Gunther just looked at me like, what? And no, it's despite the best efforts, we still haven't found the formula here. We haven't found the formula. Hey, Rob, what about Chubbuck? You have any thoughts on this one? You still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here. I just have been enjoying all the input from this, and it looks like one of the things that I've realized when I took over my current position is we really haven't, in our agency, haven't done a very good job of marketing ourselves, and part of that is because we never had to before, really, and it becomes necessary now to do that. And so I'm trying to just appreciate all the comments and getting some good ideas to get out there and do some more recruiting. I tested a group of applicants this morning and got some high hopes for them, but I know that I'm going to be constantly in that cycle of hiring and training. So
You know, one of the great things about you all in Chubbuck, and if y'all don't know where Chubbuck is, Pocatello is a small suburb of Chubbuck, Idaho.
That's right.
If with you all have a very, and it's the same in Marysville and the same in Postville. I'm aware of that as well. You all have a very dynamic new city council, a mayor that guy's just a bundle of energy. I've met the other department managers. Many of them have been through training with me, as have, you know, all of Public Works, the other people who are out on the street. And so I think the community's culture is really supportive of all of this as well. It's not like you guys trying to do it in a vacuum, right? And in Marysville, I think you got the same kind of organizational cocoon around you to help with that, as is Poulsbo. Kennewick is always without question. I mean, you guys have extraordinary reputation in the community. Chief Harding, your thoughts on, did we get the architecture down on the slide program, and any other thoughts you have right now?
I think a great framework to start from. I would say I'd love to see some more in-depth in the recruiting, especially in effective ways, maybe out of the box ways to reach minority communities. That's always been a challenge for us. And then another topic that I don't know if you want to dwell in this or delve into this, but not a victim mentality, but there is an element of our legislature that is very opposed philosophically to traditional law enforcement. But what we've been trying to do is form relationships with those senators and representatives. And I think chiefs are in a great position, sheriffs are in a great position to have those people out for coffee, take them for a ride along, tour your agency, get to know their story a little bit, and help them understand that the premise that many of that political realm are operating from is false. We do good in the community, and we're supported by their constituents. I think it's important to emphasize that.
Thank you. The other side of that, or take it a step farther, folks. I think we all got to do a better job of doing whatever we can to see to it that the right people get elected to office. Now, I'm not saying do that in uniform or get your name in the paper, but I'm talking about getting behind those folks who truly do understand that law enforcement is important. It really is a great career. As I watched what happened in Washington State with the legislative changes, law changes last year, I swear, Ron, that is a bunch of really annoying solutions to looking for a problem. Every one of those, and it's going to have to come tumbling back here. And so I admire all of you in Washington State who are, you know, making a chicken salad out of the chicken manure you were handed by the legislature. I'm sorry, did I say that out loud?
You know, you did, Steve, but at least for us, we're not seeing out-of-state laterals. So that's more for all of you out there from outside of Washington State.
Yes. Who did I miss? Greg, do you have something on this, the slide program or whatever?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot on the slide program. It looked good. Just a lot of provoking thoughts as far as how we go about combating all the negative stuff that we get in the media, and whether that's the media on what's happening in the news, but also I look at too, like if you look at the media with the TV and all the TV shows and how they depict police in different manners, that goes on and on and on and on, and we have to combat that over time. And then how can we go in and say, all right, we have the short-term stuff going on, but what does recruiting look like in 10 years from now?
Absolutely.
How can we get a handle on that so that 10 years from now, we've got all those, like whether it's the DARE program or, you know, going into the counselors with the high schools. And then, you know, we have 2 universities right here. We don't need to go to the job fairs after they've already made a decision to get into a field, but let's hit them in their classes early on when they're still trying to make a decision as a freshman.
Absolutely. And certainly the message has got to be the full range of how you all build communities, not just one tiny isolated pieces of that. Who did I miss? Anybody on here that I've missed? Well, jump in if you want to say something else on the slide program. I would ask your indulgence for a thing. If we might, I know y'all have, what do you call them, lives. And so I don't want to take a whole bunch of your time, but I would like to take about a 10-minute break. Come back at 20 after whatever the hour is on your side of the plant. Come back in 10 minutes, and it'll give me a chance to cue something up. I want us to maybe start to do something, maybe listen to what the folks on the other side might have to say about jobs and careers and the role we have as organizations to address those. So let's take 10 minutes, and I'm going to pop out here. And those of you who know me know I have a 12-year-old son, and he goes to school online at virtual school through Arizona State University. And it got really quiet upstairs. And so it's kind of frightening. I'm going to go up and see what's going on. Yesterday I did that. And I think, Terry, you saw, I heard Susan yell down the stairway, Zachariah Stephen Kent. Well, if your mom uses all three of your names, there's trouble, right? So I'm going to go check on him. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Tara, real quick before everybody pops on here.
Yes, sir.
I really say these kinds of things on a personal level, but because it kind of makes it about me and not about you. But I am so pleased for you to see you where you are.
Thank you.
I mean, I know you've worked hard. You have the that inspiration. I mean, I realized those things a long time ago when you and I first met. And I'm so pleased that the organization has recognized that as well. I have told everyone since John Dodson, which was a long time ago, right? That I believe so strongly in the culture of what y'all are doing in Sparks. And I remember telling the city administrator at the time when he was looking to hire another chief when John was going to retire. And do I recall, was Archer was before Kiefer, right? Or was it the other way?
Asher, yeah, it was Asher and then Kiefer. And
yeah,
then
okay. Okay, yeah. Yeah, Asher, I'm sorry. I got a note from him about a month ago from wherever the hell he is in Texas.
Yeah, he's in Texas. He's like in Carrollton, Texas or something.
He's like an undersheriff or something strange, yeah. I thought he would give it up, you know?
No, he can't. He can't help it.
Yeah, but I remember telling the city administrator, he said, you know, should we do a nationwide search? And I said, no. I'm convinced that even any of your sergeants could be chief of police. It's the kind of culture that you all have created in Sparks. And, you know, and I keep seeing that over and over again. So I'm just pleased for you. Good job. Good job.
You. I'm flattered. Thank you.
How's your family?
Amazing. My son's a terrorist, but he's fine. He's 2.5. So
it's a job description.
Blesses my world constantly.
Yeah, it's a job description. You probably don't recall, but we have grown children.
Yeah.
And my son, who's now 52, he was like 14 years old when Susan and I got married. And so she didn't really have any experience raising a boy. We had 4 girls, and so she was used to that. Now, Tara, just watching the looks on her face is it's worth the price of admission. As Zach does things, and I just see that look on my wife's face of disbelief.
Yeah,
raising a boy. Yeah.
It's fun. It's fun. It's exhausting, but it's fun.
Yeah,
can't replace it with anything.
Yeah, it is. Hey, do you ever run into Greta at all?
I don't. So she was teaching at UNR for a while, and then she even went back to work and worked for the county doing forensic interviewing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I'm not quite sure what she's doing with herself right now, but that was my last check-in with her as to what she was doing.
Yeah.
But she's from the area. I know she had aspirations to move into Boston, but I don't think it ever happened.
I was talking to Daniel Lawson a couple of days ago. He went through academy with me last week, and he said he runs into her from time to time, but he wasn't sure what she was doing right now.
Yeah, it was probably at the CAC if he was running into her, because he does our crimes against children. So
yeah. And please pass along my best to Nick Pawnee, will you please?
Oh, okay.
I am instructed he got promoted recently. Did I hear right?
Yeah, he's a sergeant. He's been a sergeant for a little over a year now, I think.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a little later than that. My apologies.
Yeah, I know.
All
We
right.
got lots of baby sergeants running around right now.
Well, the whole agency is young. It always has been. Of course, it's coming from me. Everybody's young. Susan said to me recently, "What is it like to be the oldest person in any room you walk into?" That's not funny, Chief Gallagher.
You make up for it with your maturity level, however, so.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah. I'll take that. I would ask everybody to bear with me on what we're about to look at. I don't know if you know who Simon Sinek is, but I want to show you a clip here. It's only 15 minutes long, but I have every time I watch it, I find it quite instructive to how to flip our thinking from being product-driven thinking. We know what's best, how to run all these things, and to turn that around and say, wait a minute, what are the people out there that we're trying to attract? What do they think? What's going on with them that we perhaps need to understand to make part of our recruiting and certainly our retention and having a positive impact on the fabric of the culture? Now, I will tell you, he uses the word corporation. And I take that in a more generic sense. Corpus, a Latin word meaning body. And so when he uses the word corporation, please don't think that he's talking about the private sector only. He's talking about any of us who have this body of people and what our responsibilities are in that process. So bear with me. I really like what this guy has to say, and we'll go from there.
What's the millennial question? Apparently millennials as a generation.
Captain Gunther, can you hear that, what they're saying? Yes, sir, thank you. I'll proceed then.
Which is a group of people who were born approximately 1984 and after, are tough to manage. And they're accused of being entitled and narcissistic and self-interested, unfocused, lazy. But entitled is the big one. And because they confound leadership so much, what's happening is leaders are asking the millennials, what do you want? And millennials are saying, we want to work in a place with purpose, love that. We want to make an impact, you know, whatever that means. We want free food and beanbags. And so somebody articulates some sort of purpose, there's lots of free food and there's beanbags, and yet for some reason, they're still not happy. And that's because they're missing, there's a missing piece. What I've learned is that I can break it down into 4 pieces, right? There are four things, 4 characteristics. One is parenting, the other one is technology, the third is impatience, and the fourth is environment. The generation that we call the millennials, too many of them grew up subject to, not my words, failed parenting strategies, you know, where, for example, they were told that they were special all the time. They were told that they could have anything they want in life, just because they want it, right? They were told, some of them got into honors classes, not because they deserved it, but because their parents complained. And some of them got A's, not because they earned them, but because the teachers didn't want to deal with the parents. Some kids got participation medals. You got a medal for coming in last, right? Which the science we know is pretty clear, which is it devalues the medal and the reward for those who actually work hard. And it actually makes the person who comes in last feel embarrassed because they know they didn't deserve it. So it actually makes them feel worse, right? So you take this group of people and they graduate school and they get a job and they're thrust into the real world. And in an instant, they find out they're not special. Their moms can't get them a promotion, that you get nothing for coming in last. And by the way, you can't just have it because you want it, right? And in an instant, their entire self-image is shattered. And so you have an entire generation that's growing up with lower self-esteem than previous generations. The other problem, to compound it, is we're growing up in a Facebook, Instagram world. In other words, we're good at putting filters on things. We're good at showing people that life is amazing even though I'm depressed, right? And so everybody sounds tough and everybody sounds like they got it all figured out. And the reality is there's very little toughness and most people don't have it figured out. And so when the more senior people say, well, what should we do? They sound like, this is what you gotta do. And they have no clue, right? So you have an entire generation growing up with lower self-esteem than previous generations, right? Through no fault of their own, right? They were dealt a bad hand, right? Now let's add in technology. We know that engagement with social media and our cell phones releases a chemical called dopamine. That's why when you get a text, it feels good, right? So, you know, we've all had it where you're feeling a little bit down or feeling a bit lonely. And so you send out 10 texts to 10 friends, you know, hi, 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 hi. Because it feels good when you get a response, right? right? It's why we count the likes. It's why we go back 10 times to see if my Instagram is growing slower, did I do something wrong? Do they not like me anymore, right? The trauma for young kids to be unfriended, right? Because we know when you get a hit of dopamine, which feels good. It's why we like it. It's why we keep going back to it. Dopamine is the exact same chemical that makes us feel good when we smoke, when we drink, and when we gamble. In other words, it's highly, highly addictive, right? We have age restrictions on smoking, gambling, and alcohol, and we have no age restrictions on social media and cell phones, which is the equivalent of opening up the liquor cabinet and saying to our teenagers, hey, by the way, this adolescence thing, if it gets you down. But that's basically what's happening. That's basically what's happening, right? That's basically what happened. You have an entire generation that has access to an addictive, numbing chemical called dopamine through social media and cell phones as they're going through the high stress of adolescence. Why is this important? Almost every alcoholic discovered alcohol when they were teenagers. When we're very, very young, the only approval we need is the approval of our parents. And as we go through adolescence, we make this transition where we now need the approval of our peers. Very frustrating for our parents, very important for us. It allows us to acculturate outside of our immediate families into the broader tribe, right? It's a highly, highly stressful and anxious period of our lives, and we're supposed to learn to rely on our friends. Some people, quite by accident, discover alcohol and numbing effects of dopamine to help them cope with the stresses and anxieties of adolescence. Unfortunately, that becomes hardwired in their brains, and for the rest of their lives, when they suffer significant stress, they will not turn to a person, they will turn to the bottle. Social stress, financial stress, career stress, that's pretty much the primary reasons why an alcoholic drinks, right? What's happening is because we're allowing unfettered access to these dopamine-producing devices and media, basically it's becoming hardwired, and what we're seeing is as they grow older, too many kids don't know how to form deep, meaningful relationships. Their words, not mine. They will admit that many of their friendships are superficial. They will admit that their friends, that they don't count on their friends, they don't rely on their friends, they have fun with their friends, but they also know that their friends will cancel on them as something better comes along. Deep, meaningful relationships are not there because they never practice the skill set, and worse, they don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with stress. So when significant stress starts to show up in their lives, they're not turning to a person, they're turning to a device, they're turning to social media, they're turning to these things which offer temporary relief. We know, the science is clear, we know that people who spend more time on Facebook suffer higher rates of depression than people who spend less time on Facebook, right? These things balanced. Alcohol is not bad, too much alcohol is bad. Gambling is fun, too much gambling is dangerous, right? There's nothing wrong with social media and cell phones. It's the imbalance, right? If you're sitting at dinner with your friends and you're texting somebody who's not there, that's a problem. That's an addiction. If you're sitting in a meeting with people you're supposed to be listening to and speaking, and you put your phone on the table, face up or face down, I don't care, that sends a subconscious message to the room that you're just not that important to me right now, right? That's what happens. And the fact that you cannot put it away is because you are addicted, right? If you wake up and you check your phone before you say good morning to your girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse, you have an addiction. And like all addiction, in time, it'll destroy relationships, it'll cost time, and it'll cost money, and it'll make your life worse, right? So you have a generation growing up with lower self-esteem that doesn't have the coping mechanisms to deal with stress, right? Now you add in the sense of impatience, right? They've grown up in a world of instant gratification. You want to buy something, you go on Amazon, it arrives the next day. You want to watch a movie? Log on and watch a movie. You don't check movie times. You want to watch a TV show? Binge. You don't even have to wait week to week to week, right? I know people who skip seasons just so they can binge at the end of the season, right? Instant gratification. You want to go on a date? You don't even have to learn how to be like, hey. You don't even have to learn and practice that skill. You don't have to be the uncomfortable one who says yes when you mean no and says no when you mean no, and yes when you don't have to swipe right. Bang, I'm a stud. Right? You don't have to learn the social coping mechanisms, right? Everything you want, you can have instantaneously. Everything you want, instant gratification, except job satisfaction and strength of relationships. There ain't no app for that. They are slow, meandering, uncomfortable, messy processes. And so I keep meeting these wonderful, fantastic, idealistic, hardworking, smart kids. They've just graduated school. They're in their entry-level job. I sit down with them and I go, how's it going? They go, I think I'm going to quit. I'm like, why? They're like, I'm not making an impact. I'm like, you've been here 8 months. You know? It's as if they're standing at the foot of a mountain and they have this abstract concept called impact that they want to have in the world, which is the summit. What they don't see is the mountain. I don't care if you go up the mountain quickly or slowly, but there's still a mountain. And so what this young generation needs to learn is patience. That some things that really, really matter, like love, or job fulfillment, joy, love of life, self-confidence, a skill set, any of these things, all of these things take time. Sometimes you can expedite pieces of it, but the overall journey is arduous and long and difficult. And if you don't ask for help and learn that skill set, you will fall off the mountain, or you will, the worst case scenario, and we're already seeing it, the worst case scenario is we're seeing an increase in suicide rates, we're seeing an increase in this generation, we're seeing an increase in accidental deaths due to drug overdoses, we're seeing more and more kids drop out of school or take leaves of absence due to depression, unheard of. These are all, this is really bad. The best case scenario, those are all bad cases, right? The best case scenario is you'll have an entire population growing up and going through life and just never really finding joy. They'll never really find deep fulfillment in work or in life. They'll just waft through life and it'll be just, it's fine. How's your job? It's fine, the same as yesterday. How's your relationship? It's fine. Like that's the best case scenario, which leads me to the fourth point, which is environment, which is we're taking this amazing group of young, fantastic kids who are just dealt a bad hand. It's no fault of their own. And we put them in corporate environments that care more about the numbers than they do about the kids. They care more about the short-term gains than the long-term life of this young human being. We care more about the year than the lifetime, right? And so we are putting them in corporate environments that aren't helping them build their confidence, that aren't helping them learn the skills of cooperation, that aren't helping them overcome the challenges of a digital world and finding more balance, that isn't helping them overcome the need to have instant gratification and teach them the joys and impact and the fulfillment you get from working hard on something for a long time that cannot be done in a month or even in a year. And so we're thrusting to them in corporate environments, and the worst part about it is they think it's them. They blame themselves. They think it's them who can't deal. And so it makes it all worse. It's not. I'm here to tell them it's not them. It's the corporations, it's the corporate environments, it's the total lack of good leadership in our world today that is making them feel the way they do. They were dealt a bad hand, and I hate to say it, but it's the company's responsibility. Sucks to be you, like we have no choice, right? This is what we got, and I wish that society and their parents did a better job. They didn't. So we're getting them in our companies, and we now have to pick up the slack. We have to work extra hard to figure out the ways that we build their confidence. We have to work extra hard to find ways to teach them the social skills that they're missing out on. There should be no cell phones in conference rooms. None. Zero. And I don't mean the kind of like sitting outside waiting to text. I mean like when you're sitting and waiting for a meeting to start, this is what we all do. We all sit here and wait for the meeting to start. Meeting starting? Okay. And we start the meeting. No, that's not how relationships are formed. Remember we talked about it's the little things? Relationships are formed this way. We're waiting for a meeting to start and we go, how's your dad? I heard he was in the hospital. Oh, he's really good. Thanks for asking. He's actually at home now. Oh, I'm really glad. It was really amazing. I know, it was really scary for a while. That's how you form relationships. Hey, did you ever get that report done? Oh my God, no, I didn't. I'll help you out. Can I help you out with that? Really? That's how trust forms. Trust doesn't form at an event in a day. Even bad times don't form trust immediately. It's the slow, steady consistency. And we have to create mechanisms where we allow for those little innocuous interactions to happen. But when we allow cell phones in conference rooms, we just, okay, have the meeting. And then my favorite is like when there's a cell phone there and you go like this, you go. It rings and you go. I'm not going to answer that. Like, Mr. Magnanimous, you know? When you're out for dinner with your friends, like, I do this with my friends. When we're going out for dinner and we're leaving together, we'll leave our cell phones at home. Who are we calling? Maybe one of us will bring a phone in case we need to call an Uber or take a picture of our meal.
Goes without saying, come on.
I mean, I'm an idealist, but I'm not insane. You know?
Not a heathen.
I mean, it looked really good. We'll take one phone. And so it's like an alcoholic. The reason you take the alcohol out of the house is because we cannot trust our willpower. We're just not strong enough. But when you remove the temptation, it actually makes it a lot easier. And so when you just say, don't check your phone, people literally will go like this. And somebody will go to the bathroom, and what's the first thing we do? Because I wouldn't want to look around the restaurant for a minute and a half, you know? But if you don't have the phone, you just kind of enjoy the world. And that's where ideas happen. The constant engagement is not where you have innovation and ideas. Ideas happen when our minds wander and we go, and you see something, I bet they could do that. That's called innovation, right? But we're taking away all those little moments, right? You should not, and none of us should charge our phones by our beds. We should be charging our phones in the living rooms, right? Remove the temptation. You wake up in the middle of the night because you can't sleep, you won't check your phone, which makes it worse. But if it's in the living room, it's relaxed, it's fine. But it's my alarm clock. Buy an alarm clock. They cost $8, right? I'll buy you an alarm.
I appreciate your indulgence in watching that. The reason I showed it.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, goodbye.
Happy New Year.
That didn't work. Stand by.
Year sort of ended and started with a bit of a bang.
No. Among the implications for me, for all of you, and thanks again for your patience for watching it, is what implications are there to how we do team building inside organizations, how we build camaraderie and mutual support and innovation among people who haven't got that ability yet, because that's who's out there, where they're not going away. That's who's out there. How are we going to deal with the issues of our responsibility, our accountability as organizations, to help them learn those things rather than simply thrusting them into the breach, so that we have leadership who's tuned to that. And I'm not talking about rank, I'm talking about anybody in the organization who's really focused on helping folks be successful here, rather than my job is to wash as many of these losers out as we possibly can. And so I would ask you to think about that. It's just, go look at Simon Sinek on millennials. Consider showing that to your command teams, showing it to your supervisory groups, and have some discussion about what is the impact on our culture, because we can't blame them anymore, folks. We simply can't blame the folks when we're trying to get folks into this industry. So that's why I wanted you to see it. I want to go back to the slide program. Put you all over there. Eric, you said you wanted to double down on something that Terry had said about the long-term recruiting effort. I want to make sure I understand your perspective on that. Eric Bush and I have had this discussion before, and before I have you respond, Eric Scarpon, I'm going to have Eric Bush respond to this one. You remember, Eric, one evening you and I had a video call, and we were talking about being vulnerable on the world stage, and your observations from the position, the job you had at the time. I seem to recall that you and I agreed that many of those folks out there, the countries who would be our antagonistic toward us, really aren't into the short-term worry stuff that we have, the instantaneous gratifications we have as Americans. They're doing strategic planning for 3 to 5 generations out. That's where they're thinking. And I think you mentioned you refer to that as thinking over the horizon. And we talked about how that really makes us vulnerable on the world stage at some level. I'm convinced, Eric Bush, that because we have these instantaneous gratification needs in America, it makes public safety vulnerable for the same reason. Do you have some thoughts about that from your perspective, given the last job you had?
Well, I appreciate, I appreciate the opportunity, Steve. The where I was going with that whole concept was, when our adversaries, if you will, look at the United States, they've realized through training that we base everything on a 4-year election cycle. Everything we try to accomplish, it's a cycle. And you can see the same thing occur to some degree when you look at an annual budget cycle, if you will, or an election cycle, local election cycle. You see these objectives and these things that want to be accomplished. Political candidates, elected officials want to accomplish certain things within their 4-year term, et cetera, et cetera. And so what happens is, what that does is it retards the ability of organizations to think beyond that cycle. And what we have to do is we have to make sure that as leaders, whether you're that elected leader or helping that elected leader, give them the tools for that strategic thinking, that you say, hey, I'm going to start something that I am not going to see the end of. And it may work out, it may not, but I'm going to be, out of office, term limited out, or dead and gone by the time this is done. But this is a direction I think is important that we move. And the challenges, I think, in our society, we have this, not only do we just have short-term gratification in general, but people want results now. And some things are just simply things that are going to are more generational, and you're looking at objectives that are 2 or 3 terrain features out or over the horizon, stuff you just can't see right now, but it's a direction you need to go. But it's, again, I'll just go back to the inductive versus deductive. It's much more deductive. Does that make sense?
Precisely. Thank you. And I appreciate the fact you had a unique perspective to be able to make those observations as well. For those of you who don't know, and I'm going to make him blush now, Eric just retired, 6 months ago? I lost track, as a major general from the United States Army. So he has had opportunities to see these things on the world level, where, I don't even know where my car keys are right now. So thank you for your perspective. And he's also a former chief of police in Prineville, Oregon. So that's a great melding of it. So now back to Chief Scarpon in Marysville. You said you want to double down on Terry's observation about certainly the short-term stuff. Yeah, we got to do some of that because you're hurting right now. The long-term stuff, you kind of got to look the troops in the eye and say, geez, I know you're going to have to tough it out for a little bit while these other things get into place, but we got to get them into place, or we're going to be, it's like wiping your nose with a hula hoop. This is never going to end. I don't know what that means, but you get the point. So your thought on doubling down on that, what were you thinking?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. One is sort of midterm, I'll call it, and that was something we realized that we had a gap of here in Marysville. So I came in as a pandemic chief in September of 2020. Marysville had the good fortune of just really relying on lateral police officers to serve its ranks, and was essentially full up at that time. But we didn't have anybody in the academy. We didn't have a robust recruiting and hiring operation going. We did stand those things up immediately, but it took us about 4 months to really get up and rolling on that. Now we're at a point where we've got 5 people in training, 5 people in the academy, and then we're continuing to work on that, just having that recruiting apparatus always going. I've seen far too many times, and I even say the home agency I came from, City of Redmond, Washington, where when we were close to full staffing, the chief executive or the hiring team took their foot off the gas and said, well, look, mission accomplished, plant the flag, we're done. No, we are always in that game. So we can never back away from that mission. And then I would say more to the long game that Chief Gallagher was talking about with creating those opportunities to form what may 15 or 10 or 15 years later pay off into somebody becoming a suspect or a prospect in that recruiting process, right? So we can't underestimate the value of those community engagement events. I'm always telling my cops here that there's more to police work than police work, right? It's not just going out, getting the bad guys, putting somebody in jail, writing a ticket, taking care of all those bits and pieces of our work. It's going out and creating relationships in the community. It might mean bailing out into a chamber event in the Latino community, creating new contacts there, helping to fill out your ranks in areas that your department needs to recruit from your minorities that live in your jurisdiction. It's creating a cadet program. That's something that we have on our horizon. We just don't, the pandemic wasn't a good time to launch a new initiative like that, but it is right up there in terms of priorities for us. And I know that's not going to pay off, even during my tenure as chief here, but for the next man or woman that steps into that role, that's going to pay off for them and subsequent leaders down the road, and ultimately it pays off for the organization. So it's really about putting all of those things together to create that long-term winning strategy.
I guess from my perspective, Chief, I'll know you've all gotten there when qualified people are beating the door down to get a job with you, even if you don't have any slots open. I'll know you made it when that occurs. And so the question is, well, how are we going to make that occur? And that's what I was hoping to kick off with this session. I'm in it for the long run with you all. I'm not going to make any money off this thing. That's not the point. I just think there's some things that we need to do for one another, and this is one that I'm bitingly pissed about. And another dimension of that is, it makes me annoyed that Chief Jenkins spends any of his time doing recruiting. He's got other things as an executive to be doing without doing those kind of things, or that we've got to have internal folks taking a sergeant off the road or the street to do recruiting. Now, that's where we are right now, but I'll know I'll know we've made it when folks are beating on the door to come to work for you. Right now, people in healthcare, and some of you heard me rant about this, people are going to hundreds of thousands of dollars of personal debt to go to become a phlebotomist, a person who takes blood, or an occupational therapist, or a physician, or a nurse practitioner. They're going into personal debt to do that. I don't see a whole lot of that in the public safety industry. So something to think about the long term. Short term, it wasn't my intent to try to come up with some just add water answer here. I don't have one. I'm sorry. But I think as we combine these things, if I heard Eric Bush and Chief Scarborough talk about, everybody says, I want to leave this a better place than I found it. Well, my view is, why don't we work on leaving it a better place for the folks 3 generations from now? That would be, I think, the strategic thought process. What do we got to do so they don't have to worry about funding? They don't have to worry about staffing. And they don't have to worry about community support. And those, we can't start any sooner than now. So, all right, well, Chris, I think I missed you on the slide program, sir. I want to try to wrap this up because I know people got better things to do than to hang out with me. But is there anything you would add to this in terms of the architecture of the slide program? And if so, what? And anything else you have to offer at this point?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Thanks for including me. Well, first of all, I want to make sure that it's clear that Ken Oak doesn't have this all figured out. I've taken a lot of notes today and I appreciate it. I love what Chief Scarborough was saying there, because out of all the things we haven't figured out, the one thing that we have figured out works well for us is a paid cadet program. And so it is for 18 to 21-year-olds. You have to have graduated high school. You have to be enrolled in college. We're paying you $14.50 an hour, which isn't as much as McDonald's is paying you. We are giving you tuition reimbursement since we require you to be in college. But so far, we've had the program now for, I want to say, 4.5 years, and we've hired 70% of our cadets as employees. Compared to people that test with the Kennewick Police Department, we hire 3% or less of them. And I've been reassigned to hiring here for about the last 5.5 months. I'm usually a street crimes detective sergeant. And I am underwhelmed by the candidates that I've been reviewing, to say the least. And so we're grabbing these cadets at 18 that we would not hire. They are immature, and we are taking them through the entire civil service hiring process, everything from the poly to the psych to the command board. They do it all. And then on their 20.5 birthday, the chief has the option of hiring them on the spot, sending them to a shortened version of the poly and the psych, and they become police officers. And again, for us to hire 70% of these folks, I think the reason why it's being successful, and this is a very unscientific observation of mine, over the last 4.5, 5 months, I'm seeing a lot of these young folks that are 21 and 22 that have made poor decisions in the last 3 to 4 years. They've had bad influences. They have to own it for themselves. They've gone out and done stupid things that are disqualifying them from being hired by us, at least for the next few years. And when we're grabbing these young folks when they're 18 and 19, and we're sticking them in a police uniform, and we're having them in a professional working environment, I think we're grabbing them when they're still young and innocent, if you will, and giving them great examples to follow. And we're just seeing success with it. Now, there's our bright spot, if you will.
Patiently waiting on their frontal lobes to develop.
Yes. As for everything else that we've been talking about, folks, we're 9% down. It felt like 18% for a while because of how many people we had in the training program. So everything that has been said today, thank you. We're going to keep at it.
All right. I would like to, unless anybody has anything of earth shattering you want to add here, even in detail, I would like to wrap this up a bit early for you all, because I know you have other things to do. I so appreciate you taking what time you've taken. When we're complete here, I will wrap this slide program up. I'll send you each a copy of it, probably with a little reminder note in the email. But I would ask, should you find it useful, take a look at it, sit down with your command teams, sit down with your supervisors and employees, sit down with the staff support sections, wherever, and complete some of these slides so we have a plan for how to go out. I'm looking for a slide here. So we can go out and have a chat with the human resources people wherever they are, with legal counsel, the things we want their help with. You know, I know that in Washington State, there is a great deal of condemnation of CJTC going on in certain geographic areas. And I think that needs to settle down in terms of the image of law enforcement and the consistency with which CJTC does things and what happens in the field. So that's going to take time. I don't know, Eric Bush, DPSST is kind of dormant in my world these days, so I don't know what they're up to. I don't hear much out of them anymore. But I think there's some things they could be doing very specifically to help with recruiting, and maybe Chris, a form of what you described. You know, maybe a pre-academy cadet academy. Who knows? I know, Terry. I think I may have cut you off when I was giving you an opportunity to talk about what you think we need to be doing better. Is there anything you want to add to that from your perspective?
No, I think we just need to broaden what we emphasize when we reach out into our communities. You know, I think an ad that was headlined, "Do you need a bachelor's degree? We can make that happen," might be more attractive than "Do you want to be on a SWAT team?" I know Port Angeles to some degree pays for people that are pursuing higher education. I think that's a great benefit. And I just sent you a link, Steve, that's something that popped up while we were having this discussion, that Alaska Air has launched an Oregon Academy to help address their pilot shortage.
Yeah, I saw that one.
I really like the idea of a paid cadet program. I think that's a cool idea. So, I just think we need to be a little more creative. And I think this kind of a brainstorming session was a great idea. And I thank you for that.
It is my honor, as you know. I'm intending to cause a follow-on meeting like this in about a month. I'll send out this slide program. Y'all do what you can to complete it or disregard it or whatever. And we'll come back together in a month and then pile our notes back together as to, what you found, what you're doing, some feedback on what we need to be doing here. And we'll take some time to share those things. If that meets with everybody's agreement. I hope that's about and I don't want to discount it, but that's about the best we can do right now is let's get a plan together. And as we know, there's two kinds of people, them that plan and them that get to live with the plan. So as we look at all the rest of these, I'd like to have these completed from your perspective. If there are other groups, we talked about civic groups, I'll add that one. And so everybody agrees that Chief Harding will head up that committee.
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
That's awesome. I'll let him know.
Oh, I'm sorry about it. He popped out and then he was trying to pop back in. So I was just messing with him.
Okay.
I was just messing.
Him
I was just messing with him. In April, I'd like to be able to have everybody come back and say, well, we said we're going to take that slide program, do what we can to fill in the blanks and maybe add some slides. If you all want, you can send it back to me after you've done that and I'll compile it into one. I can staff it that way for you. So, fill out what you can fill out and send a copy back to me and I'll compile it before the next meeting. Don't wait till the day before the meeting to do that, please. Here's what we said we'd do. Here's what we've actually done. And then the next meeting, we can talk about, okay, well, what are we going to do next? And have a rolling group here. If there are other folks that you want to have involved in this, please let me know so I can add them to the distribution list.
Hey, Steve, when you're collecting ideas, it would be great too to understand what people are doing in terms of retention, because that's the other part of, I think, the short-term plan for all of us is, how do we keep the great people that we have in our organization? And then I see Carl's got his hand up too with an idea.
Part of it is you don't let them see Marysville's signing bonus. That's a retention issue.
Yes. Guilty as charged. We're accomplices with the city of Everett in that robbery scheme.
So I added a slide, Chief. I hope you can see on your screen. It is a further admonition for all of us about trying to do things in a world that no longer exists. And this is one of them. I know from my own work with cultures in agencies that there's some old school stuff that kind of needs to go away, up through and including whenever many policies get into manuals because somebody knew it was wrong and did it anyway. And rather than deal with that man or rather than deal with that woman, typically folks write a mass policy or send up some kind of group slap email and punish everybody and then wonder why we got a recruiting and retention problem. Let's deal with the person that needs to be dealt with and reinforce catching other people doing something right rather than the alternative. And so it's little things like that. Or what are we doing to retain good people? And I'm not talking about paying money and whatever. What are you doing in the culture that keeps them here, that would make them want to volunteer if they weren't getting paid? So we'll touch on that. Chief Templeman, do you have anything for the good of the order before we clear post here today, sir? I'll go around the room and find out if anybody else wants to touch anything.
No, I don't. I appreciate you providing the forum for us to at least get this discussion started. And I look forward to certainly hearing more about this and learning more about some of the great things that we're all doing out there and improving our recruiting efforts. And I thank you for calling on me first because I have a 3 o'clock meeting. So thank you very much.
Well, take care of yourself. I hope to see you at some point in real life. So
thank you.
Be safe. Jeremy, are you still with us? We'll just scoot around here. Maybe I did ask a question. Anything else for the good of the order today, sir?
No, sir, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Let me ask the question generally, and if anybody needs to respond, they will. Does anybody have anything to add for the good of the order? Just so we can have it as a part of our party line. Carl?
Yeah, well, I thought maybe you were ignoring me intentionally, Stephen. That's fine. I'm kidding. Just a couple of observations I'm making while we're doing this is, number one, I'm data driven. And so I think that we have to come up with metrics to measure the effectiveness of the things that we're doing or the ineffectiveness of the things that we're doing. We've changed a lot of things in Washington State suddenly in the last few months. We have legislation that has created an environment where our 911 telecommunicators are now first responders. I mean, there's a bunch of positive things that tend to get, washed away in some of the media, but we need to look at what is that actually. Part of our sales pitch for that is that it's going to increase retention, it's going to increase professionalism, it's going to increase the ability for people to be hired in our profession and stay in our profession. But what's the data to support that? And so as you look at all these measures and who we're talking to and the questions we have for whether it's HR or local businesses is how do you measure that so that you know that something actually worked or didn't work, as opposed to just anecdotal storytelling, which we all do all the time. And then the other thing that caught me was, we heard about that kind of national narrative about cops and CAB and, all that stuff. And I think we at our agencies, at least some of the agencies I see represented here, we're better than that. And we have to show our local community and our prospects and our suspects, in the good suspect term, that we're not that national narrative. And that's why you want to work for us, because we don't have those systemic problems that other agencies are being accused of. And here's why we're better than that. And I think that's going to sell. And I think that's going to encourage people to want to work for you. I know that in Port Angeles, we enjoy an extraordinarily good reputation in our community. And we have to amplify that message so people want to work for this police department because we have the support of our community, because we do good police work. The same for our 911 center.
Absolutely. It reminds me, Carl, maybe at some point, if it would be helpful to all of you or any of you, maybe I'd be up for conducting a couple hours session on marketing, just purely on marketing. How do we do that? What is it? What does it mean? And how might we get that word out? And what are the messages we want to get out there? So, give that some thought, and I'd be honored to donate that to, a couple, 4 hours. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Anybody else have anything? Eric Bush, you have anything you want to wrap up with? Anybody else?
I got one final comment.
Yes, sir.
I've been in a whole bunch of police and fire departments over the last several years. And the one thing that I really believe now, far more than I probably believed it 10 years ago, is leadership matters. And I think that's something that we all need to remember.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It is, it's part of the attractant. It is a part of the culture. People want to be like that, which was, as a theme of the book that I just gave you. So, all right, anybody else have anything? All right, my friends, all of you, again, my sincere appreciation for you taking time to do this. I'll wrap up the slide program, get it to you in the next 15, 20 minutes by email. And I'll send a generic invitation to a meeting mid-April, 14th or 15th or so of April. And we'll go from there. Fair enough? All right, thank you. My best to everybody and all the people that you work with that know me, tell them hi for me. And I want all of you to remember, especially the deputy chief in Sparks, We always have free margaritas and spicy meat on a stick for people, friends who visit us here in Tucson. So keep that in mind, ma'am.
That's very tempting. Thank you.
All of you, all of you. All right, I'm out of here. Take care, you guys. Be safe out there and stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Hey, Bart, my best to the sheriff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Every time.
Thank you.